The world outside your window begins to dissolve, its sharp edges softening into a gentle velvet haze. Imagine, if you will, a bridge made not of stone or wood, but of moonlight and memory, stretching across the vast expanse of centuries. You are safe here, anchored in the absolute stillness of the present moment, even as your consciousness begins to drift toward the horizon of the 16th century. There is no urgency in this space. Time has slowed its frantic pace, settling into the steady, rhythmic pulse of a sleeping tide. Feel the weight of your body supported by the softest of clouds, every muscle releasing its grip on the day. As the modern world recedes, the air around you grows cooler, tinged with the faint salty breath of the Adriatic Sea. You are standing at the threshold of 1510, where the mist of the Venetian lagoon curls around your ankles like a silken ribbon. Ahead, a heavy oak door waits, its grain weathered by salt and sun, guarding a sanctuary of light and heat. There is a deep, resonant quiet here, a silence so profound it feels like a physical embrace. Prepare to step through the veil, leaving behind the noise of the now for the amber glow of the past. Everything is calm, everything is quiet. You are exactly where you are meant to be, ready to witness the birth of beauty in the heart of Murano. As we linger here in the blue-grey light of the Venetian dawn, consider this space our shared sanctuary, a quiet corner of history where we return night after night to find rest. If you find the gentle crackle of the furnace and the lapping of the canal water soothing to your spirit, you are invited to weave your own thread into the fabric of this growing community. By choosing to subscribe and journey with us through these forgotten corridors of time, you ensure that these whispers of history are never lost to the wind. Like the master glassblowers who carefully guard their secret formulas, your presence here helps preserve the art of stillness in an ever-moving world. Perhaps as you drift further into this immersive landscape, you might feel inclined to leave a soft signal of your presence, a like, a comment, or a shared thought, letting us know that the warmth of our Murano fire has reached you. These small gestures are the embers that keep our hearth burning, allowing us to continue crafting these long, melodic explorations into the soul of the past. But for now, let those thoughts float away like bubbles of molten glass cooling in the air. Simply breathe, listen, and allow the narrative to carry you deeper into the sanctuary. We are embarking on a journey that requires nothing from you but your quiet attention, as we prepare to enter the studio and watch the morning light dance upon the furnace floor. The heavy oak door yields with a slow rhythmic groan, a sound that seems to echo the deep ancestral respiration of the Venetian lagoon itself. As you step across the threshold, the transition from the cool, salt-laden air of the misty morning to the interior of the glassworks is not a sudden shock, but a gradual, encompassing warmth that feels like a physical embrace. This is the officina, a sanctuary of fire and silica where the air carries a weight and a texture unlike anywhere else in the world. The floor beneath your feet is composed of ancient compressed earth and smooth river stones, worn into a soft topography by the passage of countless generations of artisans. Each step you take feels solid and grounded, as if you are walking upon the very foundation of history. The light here is a masterpiece of Renaissance chiaroscuro. Long, golden fingers of dawn reach through the high, arched windows, cutting through the dimness to illuminate the millions of dust motes that dance in the air. These tiny particles of silica, lime, and wood ash spin in slow, hypnotic orbits, caught in the gentle thermal currents rising from the dormant furnaces. They look like a galaxy of fallen stars, swirling in a silent, cosmic ballet that mirrors the celestial movements of the heavens above the Adriatic. The air is thick with a complex and intoxicating bouquet, the dry, metallic tang of copper and iron, the earthy, alkaline sweetness of burnt seaweed ash, and a faint, underlying hint of the ozone that lingers after a summer storm. It is a scent that speaks of elemental transformation, of the secret alchemy that turns common sand into something as clear and ethereal as the morning sky. You breathe it in deeply, and it feels as though the very essence of the 16th century is filling your lungs, anchoring you in this specific point in time. To your left, a long workbench of dark, heavily scarred walnut stretches into the soft gloom of the studio's perimeter. Its surface is a landscape of labour, pitted with small blackened burns where molten glass has kissed the wood and stained with the vivid residues of ground cobalt, manganese, and gold leaf. You move closer, your steps silent on the earthen floor, to observe the tools laid out in a perfect, traditional geometry that has remained unchanged for centuries. There are the procelli, the long-handled steel shears that resemble the elegant beaks of ancient wading birds, their blades polished to a dull silver sheen by the friction of constant use. Beside them lie the pucellas, the shaping jacks, their metal arms slightly parted, as if in a state of perpetual anticipation. Each tool carries the weight of its own unique story, the subtle indentations in the handles where a glassblower's thumb has pressed for 20 years, and the slight, deliberate curve of a blowing iron that has been adjusted to fit the specific reach of a master craftsman. You reach out, not to touch, but to hover your palm just above the cool metal, sensing the latent energy stored within these instruments of creation. The studio is a theatre of potential, a silent orchestra waiting for the first note of the day to be struck. Further into the cavernous room, the primary furnace, the fornace, stands like a slumbering, benevolent giant. Its brickwork is a rich tapestry of scorched earth tones, deep ochres, burnt siennas, and charcoal greys, held together by a mortar that has turned to stone over decades of intense heat. Even in its state of morning rest, the furnace radiates a low, thrumming heat that you can feel against your skin, a gentle pressure that seems to vibrate at the same frequency as your own heartbeat. This heat is the soul of Murano, a constant flickering presence that never truly leaves the bones of those who work here. You watch as a single stray beam of light hits the mouth of the furnace, revealing the iridescent glaze of spilled glass that has hardened over the years into a thick, rainbow-hued crust around the opening. It looks like the scales of a mythical dragon, frozen in a moment of crystalline stillness. The silence in the studio is not an empty void, but a rich, textured tapestry of subtle sounds. You can hear the distant, rhythmic lap of water against the stone foundations of the building, a constant reminder that this island is a creature of the sea floating on the edge of the known world. There is the faint, musical tinkling of cooling glass shards in a scrap bin, a sound like tiny crystal bells ringing in a far-off underwater garden. Every corner of this architectural marvel reveals a new layer of micro-detail for your senses to explore. In the high, vaulted shadows of the rafters, you notice the intricate webs of spiders, dusted with the white powder of the glass-making process, looking like delicate lace veils draped over the rafters by the passage of time. The windows, made of small circular rouleaux, panes of glass held together by weathered lead cames, distort the view of the canal outside into a series of swirling, impressionistic ripples. The world outside is a soft blur of watery blues and mossy greens, while inside, the world is defined by the stability of stone and the promise of the forge. You find a heavy wooden stool, its legs reinforced with hand-forged iron bands, and sit for a moment to simply exist within this atmosphere. The wood is cool and smooth, offering a sturdy vantage point from which to observe the architecture of the space. Above you, the ceiling fans out in a series of elegant, functional curves, designed to draw the intense heat of the midday work upward and away from the floor. The craftsmanship of the building itself mirrors the craftsmanship of the art it houses. Nothing is accidental. Every beam and brick placed with a profound understanding of balance, endurance, and the behavior of heat. As the sun rises higher over the Venetian skyline, the colors within the studio begin to shift and deepen in a slow, chromatic progression. The shadows, once a uniform dusty grey, now take on hues of deep indigo and velvet violet. The patches of light on the floor grow more intense, turning the scattered piles of raw ingredients, fine white sand brought from the distant Dalmatian coast, and crushed pebbles from the beds of the Ticino River into mounds of glittering prehistoric diamonds. You find yourself focusing on a single pile of alum catina, the precious ash of Levantine desert plants, noticing the infinite variety of grey and silver tones within the heap. It is a humble material, yet it holds the secret to the legendary clarity of the Cristallo glass that has made this island famous from London to Constantinople. The meticulous nature of this world-building becomes increasingly clear as you sit in the silence. Every element, from the largest blackened timber to the smallest grain of translucent sand, is a vital character in this silent historical drama. You feel a sense of profound, unshakable peace, a realization that in this studio, time does not march forward in a frantic straight line, but circles back upon itself in a series of graceful loops, anchored by the unchanging laws of gravity and human skill. The atmosphere is a thick, comforting blanket, wrapping you in a historical embrace that is as solid as the brickwork of the kiln and as light as a single breath of blown glass. You are not a guest here, but a part of the stillness, a witness to the quiet majesty of a world that understands the value of patience and the beauty of the slow, deliberate act of creation. The morning is still, the fire is waiting, and the very air seems to hold its breath in anticipation of the day's first transformation. You lean back against the cool stone wall, feeling the textures of the year 1510 through your very clothes, and let the symphony of light and shadow wash over you, pulling you deeper and deeper into the heart of Murano. Consider the rafters once more, where the wood is dark with age and smoke. Each beam has been hewn by hand, the marks of the adze still visible if you look closely enough through the rising haze. These beams have held up the roof through winter storms and the stifling heat of Italian summers, surviving the rise and fall of doges and the shifting tides of empires. They are the silent sentinels of the glassworks, watching over the glowing crucibles below. You notice a small bird perched high above, its feathers a muted brown that blends into the timber. It remains perfectly still, a fellow observer of this quiet hour, waiting for the first signs of movement from the apprentices who will soon arrive to stir the coals. The bird's presence adds a touch of fragile life to the heavy industrial beauty of the space. It reminds you that even here, in a place of fire and metal, the natural world is never far away. The scent of the lagoon drifts in through a small vent, bringing with it the smell of salt, wet wood, and the faint sweet aroma of baking bread from a nearby kitchen. These scents mingle with the dry, dusty air of the workshop, creating a sensory bridge between the internal world of the artisan and the external world of the city. Your eyes wander to a shelf lined with clay pots, each containing a different mineral pigment. There is a pot of ground lapis lazuli for the deepest blues, another of malachite for a rich forest green, and a small precious jar of gold dust that will be used to create the shimmering aventurine. The colours are vibrant even in the low light, promising the spectacular beauty that will emerge once the heat of the furnace is applied. You imagine the hands that have dipped into these pots, the stained fingers of the master as he carefully measures out the secret proportions of each ingredient. This knowledge is passed down from father to son, a hidden language of chemistry and art that is guarded more fiercely than any treasure. The studio feels like a temple to this secret knowledge, a place where the ordinary is transformed into the extraordinary through the medium of fire. You are surrounded by the ghosts of 1,000 masterpieces, the echoes of glass that has long since been shattered or lost to time, and the promise of the glass that is yet to be born. The stillness is a canvas, and the morning light is the first brushstroke of a new day in the long, luminous history of Murano. As you remain seated on the sturdy wooden stool, the silence of the workshop begins to reveal its deeper, more rhythmic layers. Your gaze drifts toward the far corner of the studio where the heavy, soot-stained curtains of the annealing oven, the tempera, hang like the robes of a forgotten king. The fabric is a thick, coarse wool dyed a dark, indeterminate charcoal that has faded in patches to a ghostly grey. You find yourself mesmerized by the way the fabric falls in heavy, static folds, its weight pulling it toward the earthen floor. If you look closely, you can see the fine, silvery coating of ash that has settled into the weave over the years, a testament to the thousands of cooling vessels that have rested behind its protective veil. The texture of the wool appears rough and tactile, yet in this soft morning light it possesses a surprising softness, absorbing the golden rays of the sun rather than reflecting them. This oven is the final destination for every piece of glass created here, a place of gradual cooling where the internal stresses of the material are slowly bled away, ensuring that the beauty born of the fire does not shatter upon meeting the cold reality of the outside world. It represents the necessity of patience, the understanding that the transition from a molten state to a permanent form cannot be rushed. Moving your eyes from the heavy curtains, You notice the intricate network of cracks that lace the stone floor around the base of the furnace. These fissures are like a map of the studio's history, radiating outward from the center of the heat. Some are narrow and shallow, barely visible beneath the fine layer of dust, while others are deep and wide, filled with the debris of decades, tiny fragments of flint, drops of hardened tallow from the lamps, and the occasional glint of a lost copper coin. You find yourself tracing one particular crack with your eyes as it meanders toward a stack of fireclay crucibles piled near the wall. These crucibles, or padelle, are robust, bell-shaped vessels, their surfaces mottled with shades of buff, tan, and scorched white. They are the wombs of the glass-making process, the vessels that hold the boiling liquid light as it cooks. You can see the thumbprints of the potter who shaped them, pressed into the damp clay before they were fired, a human touch that has survived the intense temperatures of the furnace. They stand in a silent, orderly row, waiting to be filled with the raw batch of sand and ash, ready to endure the white-hot intensity of the melting cycle. The light shifting through the windows now begins to touch the ceiling again, revealing the texture of the lime wash that coats the upper walls. It is a pale, creamy white, applied in thick, uneven strokes that catch the light and create a subtle play of shadows. In some places, the lime wash has flaked away, revealing the dark, porous red of the underlying Venetian bricks. These bricks, made from the silt of the lagoon, have a soft, almost organic quality to them. They seem to breathe with the building, expanding and contracting with the cycles of the furnace. You notice a small wooden shrine tucked high into a niche between two bricks, where a faded painting of Saint Maurilio, the patron of glassmakers, watches over the studio. A tiny, unlit oil lamp hangs before it, its bronze body covered in a fine green patina. The presence of the shrine adds a layer of spiritual gravity to the workshop. Here, the labor of the hands is inextricably linked to a sense of divine mystery. The glassblower does not just work with materials, he negotiates with the elements, seeking the favor of the saints and the hidden laws of nature to ensure a successful melt. Your attention is drawn to a wooden bucket sitting near the workbench, filled to the brim with water for cooling the tools. The surface of the water is a perfect dark mirror, reflecting the heavy beams of the ceiling and the flickering light of the awakening furnace. Single drop of condensation falls from a rafter above, hitting the surface with a soft, melodic plink that resonates through the quiet room. You watch the ripples expand in perfect concentric circles, distorting the reflection into a series of dancing liquid shapes before the water settles back into its glassy stillness. This water is a vital element of the craft, providing the necessary shock to the hot tools and allowing the artisan to manipulate the glass without the wood of his bench catching fire. Beside the bucket, a stack of wet fruitwood blocks, pear and applewood specifically, rests on a low shelf. These blocks have been carved into various concave shapes, their surfaces charred black by repeated contact with molten glass. They emit a faint, sweet and smoky aroma, the scent of caramelized wood sugars that mingles with the more caustic smells of the minerals. As you breathe in this rich atmosphere, you find your focus narrowing even further, zooming in on the texture of the blowing irons, the can, leaning against a specialized rack. They are long, slender tubes of wrought iron, their ends swollen and flared from years of being dipped into the crucibles. The metal is not smooth, it is a landscape of scale and oxidation, with shades of deep plum, slate blue, and rust. You can see where the iron has been hammered and joined, the subtle swells and tapers that give each rod its particular balance. The handles are wrapped in frayed cords of hemp to protect the glassblower's hands from the heat that travels up the tube. You imagine the weight of the iron in your own hands, the cool, dry texture of the hemp, and the slight vibration that would travel through the metal as the molten glass at the other end is manipulated. There is a profound sense of ergonomics here, a design language born not of aesthetics, but of the absolute requirements of the human body in motion. In the far corner, away from the heat, sits a small desk where the master of the house keeps his ledger. It is a modest piece of furniture made of pine and stained a deep honeyed brown. On its surface lies a single sheet of parchment held down by a smooth rounded stone from the Lido beach. The parchment is a pale, buttery yellow, its edges slightly curled by the humidity of the lagoon. you can just make out the elegant looping script of the master's handwriting, recorded in dark gall ink. It is a list of ingredients, a recipe for a particular shade of smolto, or perhaps the proportions for a batch of crystal. The ink has a slight sheen to it, catching the morning light as if it was still wet. Next to the parchment sits a small glass inkwell, a beautiful object in its own right, shaped like a ribbed melon and coloured a deep translucent emerald. It is a reminder that even the most functional objects in this space are touched by the art of the craft. The inkwell casts a soft green shadow across the desk, a tiny pool of colour in the sea of warm neutrals. You look up toward the high windows again, noticing how the glass panes themselves are not perfectly clear. Each small circle of glass contains tiny trapped bubbles, pitting and subtle halls that show the movement of the glassblower's breath. These imperfections act as miniature lenses, catching the sunlight and scattering it into 1,000 tiny rainbows that drift across the walls. As the sun moves, these light patterns migrate, a slow-motion transit that marks the passage of the morning. You feel as though you're inside a giant, living optical instrument where every surface and every substance is designed to interact with light and heat. The very walls seem to hum with a low-frequency energy, a residual heat that never truly dissipates. The stillness of 1510 is not the silence of a tomb, but the quiet of a womb, a space where something precious and fragile is being nurtured into existence. Further along the wall, a series of iron hooks hold the long, wooden paddles used for stirring the batch. The wood of the paddles is bleached white by the intense heat of the furnace, the grain raised and silvered like driftwood found on a sun-scorched beach. They hang in a row, their shapes reminiscent of the oars of the gondolas that ply the canals outside. This connection to the sea is everywhere. The island of Murano is a closed ecosystem, a world within a world, and its tools and techniques are deeply influenced by its maritime surroundings. You notice a small pile of purple-hued seaweed drying near the door, its fronds brittle and salt-encrusted. This is the source of the alkali needed for the glass, a gift from the lagoon that will be burned to ash and purified through a long, laborious process. Every material here has a journey, a path from the natural world into the transformative fire of the furnace. You close your eyes for a moment, allowing the sounds of the studio to fill your mind. The distant call of a fisherman on the canal, the soft rustle of the bird in the rafters, the steady, rhythmic thrum of the furnace, it all blends into a single harmonic drone that anchors you in the present. You feel the cool air of the morning beginning to warm as the sun climbs higher, the temperature in the studio rising by imperceptible degrees. The scent of the wood smoke becomes more pronounced, a comforting domestic smell that speaks of home and hearth. You are deeply relaxed, your mind as clear and calm as a finished piece of Venetian crystal. There is no past and no future. Only this moment of perfect stillness in the heart of the 16th century. You're a silent observer of a ritual that has been performed for hundreds of years, a witness to the enduring power of human creativity and the timeless beauty of the handcrafted world. The morning continues to unfold, each minute a slow, deliberate movement in the grand symphony of the glassblower's day. As the light of the morning matures, it begins to penetrate the deeper, more secluded recesses of the studio, revealing the storage area where the finished masterpieces of the previous week are kept before they are transported to the warehouses of Venice. You rise from your stool, your movements fluid and slow as if moving through water, and walk toward a series of high recessed shelves carved directly into the thick masonry of the northern wall. These shelves are lined with clean white linen cloths, the fabrics weave visible and tactile in the strengthening light. Resting upon these cloths is an array of objects so delicate they seem to defy the laws of physics. There are long-stemmed goblets, their bowls as thin as a dragonfly's wing, tapering down to stems that have been twisted into intricate spiraling ribbons of white and clear glass. The legendary filigrana, you lean in close, your breath held in awe, to see the way the light passes through the glass. It does not simply shine through, it is captured, refracted and softened, emerging on the other side as a gentle, diffused glow that illuminates the shelf with a celestial radiance. One particular vessel catches your eye, a wide-mouthed chalice of a deep midnight blue, its surface adorned with tiny raised dots of white and gold enamel. These dots form a pattern of constellations, a miniature cosmos captured in a circle of silica. You focus on the texture of the enamel, noticing how each tiny point of color has a slight, rounded volume, a physical presence that you could feel with the tip of your finger if you dared to touch it. The blue of the glass is not uniform. It has depths and shadows, swirling with internal currents that suggest the deep, cold waters of the Adriatic at night. Beside it sits a simple, clear carafe, its form so pure and balanced that it seems to have been grown rather than made. The surface of this cristallo is so smooth it is almost invisible, its presence betrayed only by the sharp, brilliant highlights along its curved rim. You spend a long moment admiring the way the master has captured the essence of air and water, freezing a moment of fluid grace into a permanent crystalline form. The silence in this part of the studio is even more profound, a protective quiet that guards these fragile treasures. You notice the way the light reflects off the various surfaces, the matte texture of the linen, the polished sheen of the glass, and the rough, porous surface of the stone walls. These contrasting textures create a rich visual dialogue, a reminder of the diverse materials that come together in this space. Below the shelves, large wooden crates are being prepared for shipping. They are filled with fine golden straw, its stalks dry and brittle, emitting a faint, sun-drenched aroma of the harvest. You watch a stray straw end tremble in a slight draught, its shadow dancing against the side of the crate. This straw will cradle the glass on its journey across the lagoon, protecting it from the vibrations of the gondolas and the rough handling of the porters at the Rialto markets. The contrast between the humble earthbound straw and the ethereal high-art glass is a poignant reminder of the interconnectedness of all things in the Renaissance world. Moving away from the shelves, your attention is drawn to a small alcove where the master's personal tools are kept. Unlike the heavy industrial tools near the furnace, these are smaller, more specialized instruments for the most delicate work. There are tiny copper wheels for engraving, their edges sharp and precise, and fine-haired brushes made from the fur of sables for applying the enamel. You notice a small silver tray containing a collection of natural sponges, their surfaces pitted and organic, used for dampening the glass during the cutting process. Each sponge has a different density and texture, chosen for its specific ability to hold water. Next to them lies a piece of pumice stone, its grey volcanic surface used for smoothing the bases of the vessels until they are perfectly level. The meticulous organization of these tools reflects the discipline and focus required for this level of artistry. There is no room for error when working with materials this volatile and precious. Every movement must be calculated, every touch deliberate. In the corner of this alcove, a low table holds a collection of experimental glass fragments. These are the results of the master's constant quest for new colors and effects. You see a shard of glass that appears to have the texture of marble, with veins of deep red and ochre running through a milky white base, the chalcedonio. Another fragment is a brilliant opaque yellow like the yolk of a farm egg, created using secret proportions of lead and antimony. You find yourself fascinated by these beautiful failures, the pieces that didn't quite make it into a finished form, but hold the seeds of future masterpieces. They are like the sketches of a painter, providing a glimpse into the creative process and the endless curiosity of the artisan. The light catches a fragment of ruby glass, and for a moment the entire corner is bathed in a warm, bloody glow, a reminder of the power of color to evoke emotion and atmosphere. As you turn back toward the main body of the studio, you notice the way the shadows of the ceiling beams have shifted on the floor. They are shorter now, more defined, as the sun reaches its zenith. The temperature in the room has risen noticeably, the cool morning air replaced by a dry, ambient warmth that feels like a physical presence against your skin. You see a small ceramic jug sitting on a ledge, its surface beaded with condensation. Inside is a cool drink of water and vinegar, the traditional refreshment for glassblowers to help them endure the intense heat. You imagine the master taking a long, slow draught of the liquid, the sharp, acidic taste cutting through the dust in his throat. This small detail brings the human element of the studio into sharp focus, the physical endurance, the sweat, and the sheer labor that underpins the creation of such delicate beauty. Above the furnace, a large rectangular hood made of beaten copper captures the rising heat and smoke. The copper has been blackened by soot in the center, but toward the edges it retains a dull orange glow. You can see the hammer marks on its surface, hundreds of small overlapping indentations where the coppersmith shaped the metal. This hood is a vital part of the studio's ventilation system, a functional necessity that has been rendered with the same care and craftsmanship as the glass itself. It hums slightly in the rising heat, a low-frequency vibration that you can feel in the soles of your feet. This sound is the heartbeat of the building, a constant reminder of the elemental forces being harnessed within its walls. You find yourself leaning against a wooden pillar, feeling the vibration through your shoulder and closing your eyes to let the sensory experience wash over you. The scent of the studio has shifted again. The wood smoke is now accompanied by the smell of hot metal and the faint, sweet aroma of melting beeswax, used for lubricating the joints of the tools. It is a rich, layered fragrance that feels both ancient and immediate. You hear the distant sound of a bell ringing from the church of San Donato, its deep bronze tones carrying across the water and through the open windows of the studio. It is a reminder of the time, of the structured life of the island, where the rhythms of work and prayer are intertwined. You realize that you have been in this space for hours, yet time has felt elastic, expanding to accommodate the minute observations and sensory discoveries you have made. You are deeply immersed in the world of 1510, your mind and body attuned to the slow, deliberate pace of the Murano morning. Your gaze follows a single thread of spider silk that has drifted down from the rafters, catching the light as it sways in the air. It is a line of pure silver brilliance, thinner than the finest glass filament. It reminds you of the fragility of the world you are witnessing, a delicate balance of heat, skill, and material that could be shattered in an instant. Yet there is also a profound sense of continuity, a knowledge that this ritual has been performed for centuries and will continue long after you have left. You feel a deep sense of gratitude for being allowed to witness this moment of stillness, this quiet pause before the creative fire is truly unleashed. The studio is a temple of light and shadow, a sanctuary where the spirit of the Renaissance is captured in the humble materials of the earth. You breathe in the warm, dusty air one last time, feeling the peace of the morning settle deep into your bones and prepare yourself for the next stage of this journey into the heart of the glassmaker's art. The fire is calling, the glass is waiting, and the morning remains perfectly, beautifully still. The sun has climbed higher now, and the golden hour of the early morning has transitioned into a brilliant, searching clarity that exposes every hidden texture within the studio's vast interior. You move your gaze upward toward the high vaulted ceiling where the architecture reveals its true complexity. The immense crossbeams of larch wood brought down from the alpine forests and seasoned by the salty air of the lagoon are held together by massive iron bolts, hand-forged and pitted with age. These timbers are not merely structural, they are the silent witnesses to the island's history. You notice how the smoke from the furnaces over the years has coated the wood in a fine ebony patina, a layer of carbon that seems to drink in the light. In the crevices where the beams meet the stone walls, you see the remnants of ancient mud-daub nests abandoned by swallows that once found a summer home in the warmth of the rafters. The contrast between the heavy, dark wood and the pale, sun-bleached lime wash of the walls creates a visual rhythm that draws the eye upward, toward the heavens, echoing the soaring ambition of the glassblowers who work beneath them. The light now strikes a large wooden storage bin near the center of the room, filled with cullet, shards of broken glass that will be remelted to assist in the fusion of new batches. This bin is a mosaic of fragmented history. You see curved pieces of emerald green, sharp triangles of deep amethyst, and thick, jagged slabs of clear crystal that look like ice harvested from a mountain lake. As the sunlight passes through this heap of broken beauty, it creates a dazzling kaleidoscopic display on the earthen floor. The shadows cast by the glass fragments are not black, but are infused with the colors of the shards themselves, pools of sapphire, amber, and ruby that overlap and dance as the sun moves imperceptibly across the sky. You focus on one particular shard of turquoise glass, noticing the tiny internal fractures that catch the light like a trapped lightning bolt. This waste is precious, a vital ingredient in the cycle of creation, reminding you that in this studio, nothing is ever truly lost. It is simply waiting for the fire to give it a new shape and a new purpose. Beyond the storage bin, the wall is lined with specialized racks holding the blowing irons or can of varying lengths and weights. Each iron is a masterpiece of functional design, its surface a testament to the brutal environment of the furnace. You observe the way the iron has been scarred and tempered by the heat, the metal taking on a shimmering, iridescent quality known as heat scale. This scale peels away in thin, metallic flakes, revealing a slate-grey surface beneath. You imagine the tactile sensation of the iron, the way the heat would creep up the shaft, the weight of the molten gather at the tip, and the subtle vibration that travels through the tube as the artisan's breath expands the glass from within. The hemp wrappings on the handles are worn smooth by the friction of calloused palms, the fibers darkened by sweat and the oils of the skin. This is the point of contact between the human and the elemental, the bridge through which the master's will is imposed upon the liquid stone. Your attention is then drawn to the floor near the fornace, where a collection of heavy flat marble slabs known as marvers are positioned on low wooden stands. These slabs are carved from the finest Carrara marble, their surfaces polished to a mirror-like finish. However, the surface is no longer perfect. It is etched with faint, ghostly circles where the hot glass has been rolled and shaped. The marble is cool to the touch, a stark contrast to the radiating heat of the furnace only a few feet away. You watch as a stray beam of light reflects off the marble's surface, casting a bright, rectangular patch onto the side of a nearby brick pillar. The grain of the marble is a subtle, smoky grey wandering through the white stone like a river through a snowy landscape. The marver is the glassblower's anvil, the silent partner in the dance of shaping and cooling. You can almost hear the soft, rhythmic hiss of the hot glass meeting the cold stone, a sound that signifies the beginning of the material's transition from a formless mass to a structured object. In the shadows behind the marvers, a large earthenware jar sits half buried in a pile of cool sand. This jar is used to store the fine white ash from the Levante plants, a material so delicate that it must be protected from any moisture. The texture of the jar is rough and unglazed, the clay a warm terracotta red. You notice the potter's marks near the base, 3 small incised lines that represent a signature of a workshop from the mainland. The sand surrounding the jar is fine and powdery, having been sifted through silk screens to remove even the smallest pebble. This sand is the foundation of the glass, the silent, humble earth that will soon be transformed into a vessel of light. You reach down and run your hand through the sand, feeling its dry, grainy texture and the way it slips through your fingers like time itself. It is a grounding sensation, a reminder of the raw elemental origins of this sophisticated art form. Looking toward the high windows again, you notice a small, forgotten object resting on a high ledge, a simple glass bead, no larger than a pea, coloured a brilliant, opaque turquoise. It is a seed, perhaps a test piece for a larger batch of enamel or a small gift made for a child. Despite its size, it captures a significant amount of light, glowing like a small blue eye in the dimness of the upper wall. The bead is perfectly spherical, its surface smooth and unblemished, a tiny testament to the perfection that can be achieved even in the most casual of creations. It has likely sat there for months, ignored by the busy artisans, yet it remains a point of pure, concentrated colour in the vast, neutral landscape of the studio. It serves as a reminder that in Murano, beauty is not just a product but an atmosphere that permeates every corner, from the grandest chandelier to the smallest forgotten bead. The scent in this part of the studio is different. It is drier, more mineral, with a sharp ozone-like quality that comes from the piles of raw silica. There is also a faint underlying smell of old paper and leather coming from a small chest near the master's desk, where the workshop's contracts and orders are kept. The leather of the chest is cracked and peeling, the colour of a dried chestnut, and the brass hinges are green with corrosion. You imagine the history contained within that chest, the signatures of merchants from far-off lands, the detailed descriptions of ceremonial vessels for the Pope, and the secretive coded recipes that have made the workshop famous. The chest is a repository of the studio's intellectual property, a physical manifestation of the knowledge that is the island's most precious commodity. As you continue your slow contemplative tour, you notice the way the light interacts with the ironwork of the studio, the hooks, the chains, and the heavy braces that reinforce the walls. The iron is not merely black, it is a deep, bruised purple covered in a fine layer of soot that softens its hard edges. You see where the metal has been struck by the blacksmith's hammer, the facets catching the light and creating a rugged, textured surface. This ironwork provides the skeletal strength of the studio, the unyielding frame that contains the volatile energy of the fire. It is a masculine industrial presence that balances the feminine ethereal beauty of the glass. You feel the strength of the building through these iron bones, a sense of security and permanence that allows the delicate work of the glassblowers to flourish. The morning continues to unfold in a slow, majestic progression. You find yourself standing in the center of the studio, the light now surrounding you in a warm golden cocoon. The silence is still profound, yet it is a living silence, filled with the potential for sound and movement. You are a part of this architectural symphony, a silent observer in a space where every detail, from the massive beams to the smallest grain of sand, is a vital part of a grander whole. You feel a deep sense of belonging, a connection to the long line of artisans who have stood in this very spot, breathing this same dusty air and feeling the same radiating heat. The studio is not just a place of work, it is a sacred space, a temple to the enduring power of human skill and the timeless beauty of the material world. You remain still, allowing the essence of 1510 to soak into your soul, as the morning light continues its slow hypnotic dance across the floor of the Murano glassworks. The sun has now reached an angle that allows its light to probe the very foundations of the workshop, casting long dramatic shadows from the heavy brick pillars that support the central vault. You find yourself drawn toward the northern wall where the masonry is oldest, a patchwork of Roman-style flat bricks and larger porous stones harvested from the mainland ruins. Here the wall is not a flat surface, but a tactile landscape of history. You reach out your hand, finally allowing your fingertips to graze the cool, rough surface of the stone. It feels ancient, damp with the underlying moisture of the lagoon, and covered in a microscopic layer of fine white dust, the breath of the glassworks. As your fingers trace the mortar lines, you feel the indentations where seashells were once mixed into the lime, a reminder that the very walls of this studio are built from the skeletal remains of the ocean. The texture is a complex interplay of gritty sand and smooth, calcified fossils, a physical record of the island's geological and human past. In this secluded stretch of the studio, a series of heavy iron rings are bolted into the masonry, their surfaces encrusted with layers of flaking black paint and rust. These rings were once used to tether the heavy barges that brought wood directly into the workshop through a now sealed water gate. You can almost see the ghosts of those boats laden with oak and alder bobbing in the dark water as the current of the canal pulled at their hulls. The air in this corner is notably cooler, smelling of moss and wet stone, a stark contrast to the dry metallic heat radiating from the central furnaces. It is a pocket of stillness within the stillness, a place where the elements of water and earth seem to hold their ground against the encroaching fire. You notice a small patch of vibrant green moss growing in a crack near the floor, thriving in the damp shadows. Its texture is soft and velvety, a tiny oasis of biological life in a world dominated by minerals and extreme temperatures. Your gaze then shifts to a low wooden platform where the raw materials for the batch are meticulously prepared. On this platform sit several large, shallow baskets woven from split willow branches. The willow is aged to a pale straw color, the weave tight and disciplined, yet showing signs of wear where the heavy minerals have pressed against the fibers. One basket is filled with alum catina, the purified ash of soda-rich plants. It looks like a mound of soft grey snow, its surface so fine that even your slow movement nearby causes a few microscopic flakes to drift into the air. Beside it is a basket of manganese, the glassmaker's soap, used to strip the natural green tint from the molten mass and achieve the legendary clarity of Venetian crystal. The manganese is a dark, crystalline powder shimmering with a dull violet-black luster that seems to absorb the light rather than reflect it. You find yourself mesmerized by the contrast between the ethereal lightness of the ash and the dense, somber weight of the mineral powder. Above this preparation area, a small hand-painted sign is nailed to a timber post. The paint is cracked, and the Latin words are faded, but you can still discern a prayer for protection against the malocchio or evil eye, a common superstition among artisans who believe that a jealous glance could shatter a cooling vessel or cause a furnace to fail. The wood of the post is deeply grooved, the grain standing out in sharp relief like the muscles of an aging athlete. You notice a small dried sprig of rosemary tucked behind the sign, its needles brittle and grey, yet still releasing a faint ghostly scent of the Mediterranean hillside when the air stirs. This tiny detail, a mixture of faith, superstition and nature, paints a vivid picture of the interior world of the 1510 glassblower. To them, the studio is not just a factory, it is a place of spiritual negotiation, where the success of their craft depends on a harmonious relationship with both the seen and unseen worlds. Moving further along the wall, you encounter a collection of wooden molds used for creating repetitive patterns on the glass surface. These molds, carved from dense fruitwood like pear or cherry, are kept in a state of semi-dampness to prevent them from burning immediately upon contact with the molten gather. You observe the intricate carvings on the interior of a dip mold, rows of tiny diamonds, elegant fluting, and delicate floral motifs. The wood is blackened and charred from use, its surface possessing a smooth, carbonized texture that feels like polished ebony. You imagine the moment the glowing glass is thrust into this wooden heart, the hiss of steam as the moisture in the wood vaporizes, and the way the glass takes on the memory of the carvings. The molds are like the negative space of beauty, the hollow forms that give structure to the fluid energy of the fire. They sit in a quiet row, silent and patient, waiting for their turn to imprint their geometry onto the liquid stone. The light now illuminates a stack of large flat sheets of iron used for the levigation of pigments. On these plates, the master's apprentices spend hours grinding minerals into the finest possible powders using heavy stone mullers. You see the residue of yesterday's work, a smear of brilliant crimson made from ground cinnabar. Its colour so intense it seems to vibrate against the dark iron. The texture of the pigment is not uniform. It is a gradient of colour, from the thick, oily paste in the centre to the dry, translucent dust at the edges. Near the iron plates, a small glass vial contains a few drops of lavender oil, used as a medium for the most delicate enamel painting. The scent of the lavender is sharp and clean, a sudden floral note in the symphony of wood smoke and sea salt. It reminds you of the gardens of the Venetian mainland, a world of softness and fragrance that exists just beyond the industrial horizon of Murano. Your eyes wander back to the ceiling, following the path of a thick rope that hangs from a pulley system near the main furnace. The rope is made of heavy, unbleached hemp, its fibres frayed and fuzzy where it has rubbed against the wooden wheel. It looks like a great twisted vine descending from the dark canopy of the rafters to the floor. This pulley is used to lift the heavy lids of the crucibles, a task that requires both strength and precision. You notice the way the rope sways almost imperceptibly in the rising heat, a slow pendulum-like motion that marks the silent passage of the morning. The pulley wheel itself is made of cast iron, its hub lubricated with a thick yellow grease that has caught the stray dust of the studio. This mechanical element, simple and robust, is the muscle of the workshop, enabling the fragile humans to manipulate the massive forces of the furnace. As you stand in this quiet corner, the light begins to catch the surface of a small forgotten puddle of water on the floor, likely spilled from a cooling bucket. The water has settled into a depression in the uneven stone, creating a miniature lake that reflects the entire studio in its dark surface. You see the distorted reflection of the high windows, the orange glow of the furnace, and the dark, towering silhouettes of the pillars. The surface of the water is perfectly still, acting as a portal into an inverted world of shadow and light. You watch as a single dust mote lands on the surface, creating a tiny ripple that shatters the reflection for a moment before the water regains its composure. This small fleeting image captures the essence of the Murano morning, a world of profound beauty and immense power, reflected in the most humble and temporary of forms. You feel a deep sense of stillness settling into your very marrow. The studio has become a universe unto itself, a place where every object, no matter how small, is imbued with meaning and history. The textures of the 16th century, the rough stone, the charred wood, the fine ash, and the cold iron, are no longer just descriptions. They are a physical reality that surrounds you, grounding you in a time of slow, deliberate creation. You are no longer an observer from the future, you are a witness to the eternal present of the artisan. The air is warm, the scent is rich, and the light is a golden thread that binds the entire space together. You lean your head back against the cool masonry of the wall, closing your eyes to fully absorb the harmonic drone of the workshop. The furnace hums, the water laps against the stones outside, and the morning in Murano remains suspended in a state of perfect crystalline grace, waiting for the first breath of the blower to bring the glass to life. As the morning sun continues its slow, majestic ascent over the Venetian lagoon, the internal world of the studio begins to breathe with a new, more intimate rhythm. You find your gaze drawn away from the grand architecture of the vaulting and toward the small, human-scale details that define the daily life of the Murano glassblower. On a low ledge near the master's chair there sits a modest collection of personal items that speak of a life spent in the company of fire. There is a small carved wooden comb, its teeth smoothed and darkened by years of use, and a piece of coarse linen used for wiping the sweat from a brow. Beside these lies a small, hand-bound book of hours, its leather cover worn to a soft, buttery texture that reflects a faint, waxy sheen in the sunlight. You can almost feel the weight of that book in your hand, the way the parchment pages would resist slightly as you turned them, releasing a scent of old ink and dry hay. This is the quiet intersection of the spiritual and the physical, the moment where a craftsman pauses to ground himself in faith before committing his body to the grueling demands of the melt. Your eyes move to the floor near the apprentices' station, where a pair of discarded wooden clogs or zoccoli rest in the dust. They are carved from a single block of lightweight poplar, their soles thick and sturdy to protect the wearer from the heat of the floor and the occasional stray shard of glass. The wood is pale, almost white, but stained with patches of dark moisture and ash. You notice the deep grooves worn into the wood where the apprentice's toes have gripped the surface for balance during a long day of marvering. The simplicity of these shoes is a stark contrast to the ethereal elegance of the glass they help create. They represent the literal foundation of the craft, the heavy, unglamorous contact with the earth that allows the artist to reach for the clarity of the sky. You imagine the sound they make on the stone floor, a rhythmic, hollow clack-clack that would punctuate the silence of the workday, a steady beat in the industrial symphony of Murano. Near the central pillar, a large ceramic water vessel, a giara, stands in a bed of damp sand. Its surface is unglazed, allowing for a slow evaporation that keeps the water inside remarkably cool, even as the furnace begins to radiate its midday intensity. The clay is a pale sandy pink, decorated with a simple undulating line of blue cobalt. You watch a single bead of moisture as it forms on the porous exterior, swelling slowly until its weight overcomes its surface tension, and it slides down the side of the jar to be absorbed by the sand. The texture of the jar is matte and slightly gritty, and if you were to touch it, your hand would come away with the faint metallic scent of cold earth. This vessel is the communal heart of the workshop, a source of life and relief that everyone from the master to the youngest boy shares. It is a reminder that even in a place of extreme heat, the memory of water is never far away. Your attention is drawn back to the master's workbench, where a small specialized tool known as a tagliante, a pair of heavy-duty glass-cutting tongs, rests on a bed of fine leather. The metal of the tongs is a deep, bruised charcoal color, its surface textured with a fine grain from the forging process. Unlike the more delicate shears, these tongs feel heavy and purposeful. Beside them, there is a small pile of punty, metal rods used to hold the glass during the finishing process. The ends of these rods are coated in a layer of punty glass, a jagged, colorful build-up of previous projects that looks like a cluster of barnacles on a ship's hull. Each rod is a vertical record of color, a layer of ruby red followed by a streak of cobalt, then a shimmering bit of gold leaf. You find yourself fascinated by this accidental art, the way the waste of the process creates its own rugged beauty. The texture of this build-up is sharp and crystalline, catching the light in 1,000 tiny facets that glitter like gems in the shadow of the bench. As you look around, you notice the subtle presence of the glassblower's hand in everything, the way a door handle has been wrapped in leather for a better grip, or the way a stool has been notched to hold a specific tool. In 1510, there is no mass production. Every object in this room has been adapted, repaired, or custom-made to fit the needs of the people who live and work here. This creates a space that feels deeply organic, almost like a living organism that has grown around the furnace. You observe a small bundle of dried herbs, thyme and sage, hanging from a low rafter near the window. Their leaves are dusty and brittle, but they serve a dual purpose: to mask the sulphurous smells of the melting batch and to provide a quick remedy for the minor burns that are an inevitable part of the trade. The sight of these grey-green leaves against the dark, smoke-stained wood of the rafters is a touch of domesticity in an industrial landscape, a reminder of the gardens of Murano that exist just beyond the studio walls. The light is shifting again, and it now falls upon a section of the wall where the master glassblowers have, over the years, scratched their names and dates into the soft lime plaster. Some of the inscriptions are elegant and flourishing, the work of proud men at the height of their powers. Others are simple, tentative marks made by those who are just beginning their journey. You see a date, 1492, and another, 1504, scratched near a small drawing of a goblet. These marks are a humble form of immortality, a way for the artisans to say, "I was here, I breathed this air, I mastered this fire." The texture of the wall is a palimpsest of human presence, a physical record of the lineage that has kept the secrets of Murano for centuries. You run your eyes over these faint lines, feeling a profound connection to the men who stood in this very light, their hands calloused and their eyes bright with the reflection of the glass. In a darker corner of the workshop, you notice a large wooden wheel mounted on a heavy frame. This is the malaria wheel, used for the cold working of glass, the grinding and polishing that gives the finished pieces their final brilliant sheen. The wheel is made of a dense, dark stone, its surface smooth but slightly porous. Below it, a lead-lined trough is filled with a mixture of water and fine abrasive sand. The air in this corner smells of wet stone and grounded glass, a sharp, clean scent that contrasts with the smoky warmth of the furnace. You imagine the artisan standing here, his arms braced against the frame, as he holds a cooling vase against the spinning wheel. The sound would be a low, rhythmic growl, a counterpoint to the high-pitched tinkling of the glass fragments. The wheel is silent now, but its presence reminds you of the immense physical effort required to move from the fluid heat of the furnace to the sharp, cold perfection of the finished product. You find yourself looking at the shadows again, which have now become shorter and more intense. The contrast between light and dark is at its most extreme, creating a landscape of deep black and brilliant gold. You notice how the shadow of a hanging iron lamp, shaped like a simplified lantern, stretches across the floor. The shadow is elongated and distorted by the uneven stones, looking like a strange, geometric ghost. The lamp itself is a simple construction of iron and horn, the horn panes yellowed and opaque with age. It hangs from a long soot-covered chain that disappears into the darkness of the rafters. Even this humble object is a testament to the resourcefulness of the era, using the materials at hand to create light in the darkness. You imagine it flickering at night, casting a warm, unsteady glow over the glowing mouth of the furnace, creating a theatre of shadow for the men who work through the long, hot hours of the melt. The sensory richness of the studio is overwhelming, yet deeply calming. You are surrounded by the textures of a world that values the slow, the tactile, and the enduring. Every object tells a story of transformation, of sand into glass, of wood into ash, of effort into beauty. You feel the history of the island of Murano pressing in around you, a weight that is not heavy but supportive like the water of the lagoon. You are a witness to a tradition that is both fragile and indestructible, a flame that has been passed from hand to hand for 500 years. As you sit in the stillness of 1510, you realize that you are not just seeing the past, you are experiencing the soul of a craft that remains unchanged by the passage of time. The air is still, the furnace is a low, thrumming presence, and the morning continues to drift toward the heat of the day, carrying you further into the hypnotic heart of the glassworks. You let your breath fall into sync with the slow pulse of the studio, a silent participant in the eternal morning of the master glassblower. The sun has now reached a position where its rays strike the southern wall at a sharp, grazing angle, revealing a hidden topography of the masonry that remained invisible in the softer light of dawn. This wall is a mosaic of survival, repaired and reinforced through the decades with whatever materials the lagoon provided. You can see the distinct texture of Istrian stone, a dense, pale limestone that has been weathered by the salt air until it resembles the bleached bone of a great sea creature. Where the stone meets the brick, there are thick, irregular seams of mortar, mixed with a high proportion of crushed brick dust, giving the joints a warm, rosy hue. This is the structural heartbeat of 1510. It is a world built by hand, where the imperfections are not flaws but signatures of the human touch. You find yourself focusing on a single, protruding stone that has been worn smooth by generations of glassblowers leaning against it during their brief moments of respite. The surface of the stone is polished to a tactile, silk-like finish, its coolness a silent comfort against the rising ambient temperature of the workshop. Below this weathered wall sits a low, heavy chest made of seasoned oak, its lid reinforced with bands of hand-wrought iron. This is the arca, where the most precious of the raw minerals are stored under lock and key. The wood of the chest is so dark it is nearly black, its grain deep and cavernous, holding the shadows of the room within its fibres. You notice the way the iron bands have been hammered, the surface showing the rhythmic, overlapping strikes of the blacksmith's hammer. Fine layer of grey ash has settled into these indentations, highlighting the craftsmanship of the ironwork. This chest contains the secrets of the colour, the rare oxides brought from the mines of Central Europe, and the exotic pigments traded along the Silk Road. The air immediately surrounding the chest carries a faint, sharp scent, a dry mineral tang that tickles the back of the throat. It is the scent of potential of the vibrant blues, greens and reds that are currently dormant in powder form, waiting for the furnace to unlock their brilliance. In the centre of the studio, the main furnace continues its steady, low-frequency hum, a sound that has become the foundational drone of your consciousness. You notice the way the air directly above the furnace mouth shimmer and undulates, a visual distortion caused by the extreme heat. This heat shimmer makes the heavy rafters above appear to bend and sway, as if the building itself were a living, breathing entity caught in a fever dream. The texture of the air here is palpable. It feels thick and viscous, pressing against your skin with a dry, insistent weight. You watch a single stray piece of straw from a shipping crate catch a thermal current and rise toward the ceiling, spinning in a frantic, hypnotic circle before it is incinerated in a tiny, silent flash of orange light. This micro-event is a reminder of the raw, predatory power of the fire that dwells within the brickwork, a power that is both the glassblower's greatest ally and his most dangerous adversary. Your eyes drift to the floor near the piazza, the main working area, where a small wooden tray holds a collection of trial pieces, or prove these are small, palm-sized blobs of glass that the master has drawn from the crucible to check the clarity and colour of the melt. They are shaped like flattened tears, each one capturing a different stage of the chemical transformation. One is a cloudy, milky white, still full of unrefined gases. Another is a swirling mix of amber and clear, like a piece of prehistoric resin. A third is a perfect jewel-like emerald, its surface so smooth it looks wet. You find yourself captivated by the way these trial pieces sit in the dust, like discarded gems from a giant's pocket. The contrast between the rough earthen floor and the refined luminous glass is a constant theme in this space, the eternal struggle between the base materials of the world and the transcendent beauty of the art. To the right of the furnace, a series of iron buckets are filled with various grades of abrasive sand used for the initial stages of polishing. You reach out your mind to feel the texture of the coarsest grade. It is sharp and crystalline, made of crushed flint that would bite into the skin with a harsh, rasping touch. Beside it, the finest grade is as soft as flour, a silken powder that feels almost like a liquid when stirred. These sands are the agents of friction, the humble tools that will eventually strip away the rough skin of the cooling glass to reveal the fire within. You notice how the light reflects off the individual grains of the coarser sand, creating a million tiny sparkling highlights that mimic the stars above the lagoon. The buckets themselves are heavily oxidized, their rims jagged and worn, showing the heavy labor of the apprentices who must constantly haul and sift these materials. Looking upward, you notice the complex system of iron chains and counterweights that allow the furnace doors to be raised and lowered with minimal effort. These weights are simple, heavy cylinders of lead, their surfaces dull and grey, pitted with small dents from decades of clanking against one another. The chains are thick and oily, coated in a mixture of soot and tallow to prevent them from seizing in the dry heat. You find yourself following the path of one chain as it disappears into the dark recesses of the rafters, imagining the mechanical intelligence that went into designing this system. In 1510, the glassworks is a marvel of pre-industrial engineering, a place where the laws of physics are harnessed through the medium of iron, wood, and hemp. The silence of the morning is occasionally punctuated by the soft metallic chink of a chain settling in its groove, a sound that feels both lonely and reassuring. In a quiet corner away from the direct light of the windows stands a tall, narrow cupboard where the studio's glassware for daily use is kept. This is not the high art glass meant for the courts of Europe, but the functional, common glass of the Venetian household. You see rows of simple, footless tumblers, their glass a pale, watery green known as vetro commune. The texture of this glass is different. It is thicker, full of tiny seeds and swirls, giving it a rustic, organic quality. Beside them sit a few ceramic plates, glazed in a simple tin white with blue floral patterns, and a wooden trencher that has been scrubbed until the grain stands out in sharp relief. This small collection of domestic objects provides a glimpse into the life of the artisans when they are not at the furnace. It speaks of simple meals of bread, wine, and salted fish, taken in the brief intervals between the cycles of the melt. The scent here is different, too, a faint smell of dried vinegar and old wood, a domestic counterpoint to the industrial odours of the workshop. You notice a small, hand-carved wooden crucifix hanging above the cupboard, its surface darkened by the same smoke that has seasoned the rafters. The figure of Christ is simplified, almost abstract, the marks of the knife still visible in the wood. It is a humble object of devotion, a reminder that in the Renaissance the labour of the hand was always performed under the gaze of the divine. The light catches the top of the cross, creating a small golden highlight that stands out against the dark shadows of the corner. This small detail adds a layer of solemnity to the room, a sense that the studio is a place of pilgrimage as much as it is a place of work. You feel the weight of this tradition, the way it binds the artisans together in a shared culture of faith and craftsmanship. As the sun continues its journey, the patterns of light and shadow on the floor become even more intricate. You find yourself tracing the shadow of a large, three-legged stool, noting how its form is elongated and twisted by the uneven surface of the earth. The shadow moves so slowly it is almost imperceptible, yet it is a constant reminder of the relentless passage of time. You are suspended in a moment of perfect observation, your senses heightened by the stillness and the heat. The studio is a world of textures, the scratchy wool of a curtain, the cold iron of a tool, the gritty sand of the batch, and the smooth, ethereal surface of the glass. Each texture contributes to the rich sensory tapestry of 1510, a world that is as solid and enduring as the stones of Venice herself. You breathe in the warm, dusty air, feeling the history of the place settle into your bones, and prepare yourself to drift even deeper into the hypnotic rhythm of the Murano morning. The fire is steady, the light is golden, and the stillness is a profound, unshakable reality. The sun has now reached its midday zenith, and the light within the studio has transformed from the gentle, searching fingers of the morning into a heavy, golden deluge that seems to fill the space like a liquid. In this intense clarity, your attention is drawn to the banco, the glassblower's chair, which sits like a throne of industry in the heart of the working area. This is not a chair in any conventional sense, but a specialized workstation crafted from massive slabs of aged oak. The wood is scarred and blackened by centuries of proximity to the fire, its surface possessing a deep scorched grain that looks like the bark of an ancient petrified tree. You focus on the two long parallel arms of the chair, the bracci, which are capped with smooth polished strips of iron. It is along these rails that the master glassblower rolls his blowing iron back and forth, using the constant motion to keep the molten glass perfectly centered and symmetrical. You can see the faint rhythmic grooves worn into the iron by the friction of the rods, a physical record of the thousands of miles of iron that have been rolled across these surfaces. Beside the chair, the floor is littered with a fine silvery white powder, a mixture of wood ash and dry lime that is used to prevent the hot glass from sticking to the tools. This powder is so light that it seems to float just above the stones, disturbed by even the most microscopic movement of air. You find yourself mesmerized by the way it settles into the deep cracks of the floor, creating a map of white veins against the dark, earthy background. The scent here is sharp and alkaline, a dry, dusty smell that speaks of the chemical foundations of the glass. You notice a small wooden bucket near the foot of the chair, filled with a thick, dark slurry of water and ground charcoal. This is used for lubricating the wooden blocks, and the surface of the liquid is coated in a swirling, iridescent film of oil and ash, reflecting the orange glow of the furnace in a series of psychedelic liquid patterns. The contrast between the pristine white powder on the floor and the dark, oily slurry in the bucket is a testament to the diverse and often messy materials required to create such clean, luminous art. Your gaze then wanders to the master's personal toolkit, which hangs on a series of iron hooks within arm's reach of the chair. Each tool is a study in specialized ergonomics, shaped by the specific needs of the human hand and the unique properties of molten glass. You notice the borzelle, the small tongs used for decorative work, their tips shaped into delicate patterns like the petals of a flower or the scales of a fish. These tools are made of a lighter grade of steel, their surfaces polished until they gleam like surgical instruments. Beside them hang the taglianti, the heavy shears used for cutting the hot glass, their blades showing the characteristic blue-grey tint of tempered metal. You find yourself focusing on the hinge of the shears, noticing the small drop of yellow oil that clings to the pin, a sign of the meticulous care the master takes of his instruments. These tools are not mere objects, they are extensions of the master's own body, the mechanical bridge between his creative vision and the volatile reality of the fire. Above the workstation, a large rectangular piece of slate is mounted on the wall, used for sketching out the dimensions of a new project. On its dark matte surface, you can see the faint, ghostly remains of previous designs, the elegant curve of a vase, the intricate stem of a goblet, the precise geometry of a decorative bowl. The sketches are made with a piece of soft white chalk, the lines thick and confident. You notice the way the chalk dust has collected in a small pile on the ledge below the slate, a reminder of the intellectual labor that precedes the physical act of creation. The master does not work blindly. Every piece of glass is the result of a carefully calculated plan, a marriage of mathematical precision and artistic intuition. The slate is a place of transition, where ideas are given their first fleeting form before being translated into the permanent medium of glass. In the shadows beneath the workbench, a collection of heavy iron weights, contrapesi, sits in a wooden crate. These are used to balance the long blowing irons when working with particularly large or heavy gathers of glass. The weights are simple, unadorned cylinders of iron, their surfaces pitted with rust and coated in a fine layer of soot. You imagine the physical strain of lifting a 10-pound mass of molten glass on the end of a 5-foot iron rod, the muscles of the glassblower's arms and back tensing as he fights the relentless pull of gravity. The weights are a silent acknowledgement of the sheer physical power required for this craft, a reminder that the glassblower is as much a laborer as he is an artist. The texture of the iron is cold and unyielding, a stark contrast to the fluid, ephemeral nature of the material it helps to shape. The light now catches a small glass-fronted cabinet mounted high on the wall, away from the dust and heat of the floor. Inside, the master keeps his most precious samples of colour, small jewel-like buttons of glass that represent the culmination of his laboratory experiments. You see a button of latimo, a milky white glass made with tin and arsenic that mimics the appearance of fine Chinese porcelain. Beside it is a sample of rubino, a deep blood-red glass created with pulverized gold, a color so expensive and difficult to produce that it is reserved for the most prestigious commissions. The buttons are arranged in a neat grid, glowing in the midday sun like a collection of exotic beetles. The surface of the glass is so smooth it reflects the entire studio in miniature, a series of tiny, distorted worlds captured within circles of color. This cabinet is the master's pride, his personal archive of the secrets that have made his workshop famous throughout the Republic of Venice. You notice the way the light interacts with the heavy timber columns that support the central vault. These pillars are not perfectly square. They have been hewn with a broadaxe, leaving a series of shallow, rhythmic indentations in the wood. Over the centuries, the wood has been polished by the passage of hands and shoulders, the high points of the grain taking on a soft, waxy sheen. You find yourself focusing on a single knot in the wood, a swirling vortex of dark brown and amber that looks like a miniature galaxy. The texture of the wood is warm and organic, providing a grounding contrast to the cold industrial materials of the furnace and the tools. 1510, there is a profound respect for the inherent beauty of natural materials, an understanding that the character of the wood and stone is an essential part of the character of the building. The air in the studio has now reached a state of perfect dry equilibrium. The scents of wood smoke, sea salt, and hot metal have merged into a single complex aroma that feels like the very smell of history. You hear the distant, muffled sound of a drum from the nearby Piazza San Donato, a rhythmic thumping that marks a civic procession or a religious festival. The sound is a reminder that while the studio is a sanctuary of focus and creation, it is also a part of a larger, vibrant community. You feel the pulse of the island through the floor, a subtle vibration that connects you to the thousands of other artisans, sailors, and merchants who call Murano home. The studio is a world within a world, a place where the chaotic energy of the Renaissance is distilled into the focused, deliberate act of glassmaking. You look toward the high windows again, noticing how the blue of the sky has deepened into a brilliant, saturated azure. The small, circular panes of glass in the windows act as prisms, casting a series of overlapping, rainbow-hued patterns across the ceiling beams. These light spills move slowly as the sun begins its gradual descent, a silent clock that marks the rhythm of the day. You feel a sense of profound contentment, a realization that in this moment of stillness you are witnessing the absolute pinnacle of human craftsmanship. The studio is a temple of light, a place where the elements of the earth are transformed into objects of divine beauty through the medium of human breath and fire. You close your eyes, letting the warmth of the sun and the low hum of the furnace wash over you, deeper and deeper into the hypnotic golden heart of 1510. The world is at peace, the fire is steady, and the morning has finally given way to the timeless majesty of the Murano noon. The intense overhead light of midday has begun its subtle migration, and as it shifts, it illuminates the eastern perimeter of the studio, a region dedicated to the storage and preparation of the specialized fuel that feeds the furnace's insatiable hunger. Here, stacked in meticulous, towering rows that reach toward the darkened rafters, are the logs of alder and willow. These woods are chosen with the same discernment a painter might use to select his pigments. They burn with a fierce, clean heat and a minimal amount of smoke, ensuring that no soot or impurities mar the crystalline clarity of the cristallo. You find yourself focusing on the texture of the stacked wood. The bark of the alder is a muted silvery grey textured with small horizontal lenticels that look like tiny closed eyes. Where the wood has been split, the interior reveals a surprising pale orange hue that deepens into a rich toasted tan as the air and heat touch it. The scent in this corner is profoundly different from the rest of the studio. It is the crisp, dry aroma of a dormant forest, a scent of sap and cellulose that has been baked by the ambient warmth until it is as fragrant as aged cedar. Your gaze lingers on the floor at the base of these wood piles where a thick carpet of wood shavings and sawdust has accumulated. This debris is not mere waste, it is a soft insulating layer that dampens the sound of footsteps and absorbs the moisture that occasionally seeps through the stone foundations from the canal. The shavings are curled into delicate blonde ringlets, looking like the discarded shavings of a master luthier. You imagine the tactile sensation of kneeling in this pile, the dry, springy resistance of the wood curls and the faint, dusty clouds of sawdust that would rise at the slightest touch. In the dim light beneath the wood racks, you notice the rhythmic patterns of the shadows cast by the logs, a series of dark, parallel lines that create a sense of skeletal order in the midst of the industrial chaos. This wood is the potential energy of the workshop, the stored sunlight of years past that will soon be released as the transformative fire of the furnace. Moving along the wall, you encounter a large iron-bound vat filled with a thick greyish liquid, the Murano. This is a solution of wood ash and water, a primitive but effective caustic agent used for cleaning the iron tools and neutralizing the acidic residues of the melting process. The surface of the liquid is as still as a frozen pond coated in a fine, white film of calcium carbonate that has precipitated out of the solution. You notice a long wooden ladle resting across the rim of the vat, its bowl stained a deep, permanent grey. The handle of the ladle is worn smooth, the wood having been bleached and eroded by the caustic liquid until the grain stands out in sharp, silvered relief. The scent here is sharp and soapy, a clean, biting aroma that cuts through the heavier smells of smoke and metal. It is a reminder that the beauty of the finished glass is built upon a foundation of rigorous cleanliness and chemical precision. Above the fuel storage, the wall features a series of high, narrow niches where the apprentices keep their personal water flasks and small parcels of food. One such parcel, wrapped in a piece of grease-stained parchment, sits forgotten in the corner of a niche. The parchment is a dull, translucent yellow, its edges curled and blackened by the heat. You find yourself zooming in on the texture of the string used to tie the parcel, a rough two-ply cord of unbleached hemp, its fibres frayed and fuzzy. This small domestic detail brings the lives of the workmen into sharp relief. You imagine a young boy from the mainland, perhaps only 12 years old, sitting in this quiet corner during a break in the melt, eating a simple meal of hard cheese and dark bread while watching the master at the chair. The studio is not just a place of high art, it is a place of survival, of long hours and hard labour, fueled by the simplest of human needs. Your attention is then drawn to a massive stone-carved basin set into the floor near the water gate. This is the trogolo, used for the rapid cooling of the heavy iron blowpipes. The water in the basin is dark and murky, filled with a suspension of fine charcoal and iron scale. You watch as a stray beam of light hits the surface, revealing the oily, kaleidoscopic swirls that dance across the water, a miniature aurora borealis of purple, green, and gold. The stone of the basin is a dark, porous basalt, its rim smoothed by the constant friction of the heavy iron pipes. You notice the deep, vertical scars on the interior of the stone, marks made by generations of glassblowers as they plunged their glowing irons into the water to temper the metal. The sound of this process, the violent, hissing scream of steam as white-hot iron meets cold water, is currently absent, but the basin remains as a silent monument to that repeating cycle of fire and water. Looking toward the center of the room, you see a collection of large, flat-bottomed baskets made of woven seagrass. These baskets are used to transport the raw silica sand from the barges to the mixing floor. The seagrass has a dull, greenish-brown color and a rough, abrasive texture. You notice the way the weave has been reinforced with strips of old leather at the handles, the leather cracked and sweat-stained. Inside one basket, a few grains of the Dalmatian sand remain, glowing like tiny translucent pearls in the midday light. Each grain is a perfect miniature crystal, polished by the waves of the Adriatic for millennia before being brought here to be reborn as glass. You find yourself focusing on the infinite variety of these grains. Some are clear as water, others are a pale, milky rose, and some are a smoky grey. Together they represent the raw material of the master's vision, the humble earth that will be elevated to the status of a masterpiece. In a quiet area behind the annealing oven, A row of tall, narrow wooden cupboards holds the secret ingredients, the rare minerals and metallic oxides that are the source of the workshop's unique color palette. The doors of the cupboards are kept tightly closed, but you can see the faint dusting of colored powders around the keyholes, a trace of cobalt blue here, a smudge of copper green there. The wood of the cupboards is a dark, seasoned walnut, its surface polished by the constant touch of the master's hands. You imagine the contents of these cabinets: jars of ground lapis lazuli from the east, packets of silver nitrate, and the precious dark grains of manganese from the mountains of the north. These are the spices of the glassmaker's kitchen, the volatile substances that, in the right proportions, can turn a batch of clear glass into a vessel of ruby, sapphire, or emerald. The air in this secluded nook is heavy with a dry, metallic scent, a concentrated essence of the earth's hidden treasures. As you stand in this area of the studio, you notice the way the light reflects off the back of the annealing oven. The bricks here are not the scorched, blackened ones of the furnace mouth, but are a soft, dusty red, having been kept at a lower, steady temperature for days. You see the way the mortar has crumbled in a few places, revealing the inner heart of the wall. A small, jumping spider, no larger than a grain of sand, moves across the bricks with sudden, jerky motions. You watch its progress as it navigates the vast landscape of a single brick, its tiny shadow trailing behind it. This micro-level observation anchors you even deeper in the stillness of the moment. In the grand scale of the glassworks, the spider is insignificant, yet its presence adds a layer of life and complexity to the historical scene. It is a reminder that even in a place of fire and industry, the natural world continues its own quiet, relentless rhythms. The afternoon is beginning to stretch its shadows, and the temperature in the studio has plateaued into a steady, radiating warmth. The silence remains unbroken, a thick, textured quiet that is filled with the presence of the past. You feel the weight of the 5 centuries that separate you from this moment. Yet the sensory details, the scent of the alder wood, the texture of the seagrass, the shimmer of the water in the basin, are so vivid they bridge the gap of time. You are a silent observer of a world that is both robust and fragile, a world where the transformation of the elements is a daily ritual. You lean against a stack of alder logs, feeling the rough bark through your sleeve and the solid strength of the wood behind you. The studio is a sanctuary of focus and patience, a place where the slow, deliberate movement of the sun mirrors the slow, deliberate creation of beauty. You close your eyes for a moment, letting the dry, fragrant air of the woodpile fill your senses, and drift deeper into the heart of the Murano morning, a witness to the eternal art of the glassblower. The shifting arc of the sun now casts its brilliance upon the western quadrant of the studio, where the conceria, the mixing area for the raw batch, rests in a state of pristine, expectant order. Here, the floor is not made of the common earth and stone found elsewhere, but is paved with large, flat slabs of white Istrian marble, chosen for its non-porous surface that ensures no stray mineral or grain of dust contaminates the purity of the mix. You move your gaze slowly across this pale landscape, noticing how the midday light makes the marble appear almost translucent at the edges, as if the stone itself were aspiring to become glass. The surface is covered in a fine, microscopic dusting of fritter, the roasted mixture of sand and alkali that serves as the precursor to the final melt. This powder is a pale, creamy yellow, its texture appearing as soft as sifted flour, yet you know that beneath that softness lies the crystalline hardness of the silica. The way the light catches the peaks and valleys of this scattered powder creates a miniature lunar landscape, a world of soft shadows and brilliant highlights that exists only for this brief hour of the day. At the center of this marble expanse sits the master's mixing trough, a long, shallow vessel carved from a single massive trunk of heartwood chestnut. The wood is a deep, resonant brown, polished by the constant friction of the mixing paddles until it glows with a dark inner fire. You focus on the interior of the trough, where the grain of the wood has been worn into undulating waves, mimicking the flow of the water that once brought these materials to the island. A heavy wooden rake, the grammula, rests against the side of the trough. Its tines are tipped with iron, and the wood of the handle is darkened by the oils of 1,000 handprints. You can see the fine, silvery splinters where the wood has weathered the abrasive nature of the sand, and the way the iron tips have been ground down to smooth, rounded points. This tool is the instrument of the marriage, the process by which the disparate elements of earth, sea, and mountain are bound together in a chemical union that only the furnace can finalize. The scent in this area is dry and sharp, a clean, biting aroma of salt and flint that seems to cleanse the senses after the heavy smoke of the fuel stacks. Your attention is drawn to a series of smaller secondary vessels arranged along the marble wall, each containing a different flux or stabilizer. There is a jar of ground seashells, their calcium carbonate, providing the strength and durability the glass will need to survive the centuries. You zoom in on the texture of the ground shells. They are not a uniform powder, but a collection of tiny, jagged flakes that shimmer with a faint pearlescent luster, a ghostly reminder of their life beneath the waves of the lagoon. Beside them is a bowl of white lead, a heavy, dense powder that gives the glass its brilliance and weight. The powder is so fine it clings to the sides of the bowl like a heavy mist, its surface reflecting a dull leaden grey that contrasts sharply with the brilliance of the marble floor. These materials represent the hidden anatomy of the glass, the bones and the breath that will allow the molten light to hold its shape once it leaves the fire. High above the mixing floor, a series of narrow wooden shelves are packed with bundles of dried herbs and specialized brushes. You notice a bundle of long, stiff broomcorn tied together with a strip of dark, weathered leather. This is used to sweep the marble floor between batches, ensuring that not a single grain of the previous color remains to poison the next melt. The texture of the broomcorn is rough and straw-like, its ends frayed and dusty. Next to it lies a collection of fine-haired brushes made from the tails of squirrels, their bristles so soft they would leave no mark on the finest gold leaf. These are used for the most delicate adjustments to the batch, whisking away a stray speck of charcoal or a rogue flake of iron. The juxtaposition of the heavy industrial rake and these feather-light brushes encapsulates the duality of the Murano studio. It is a place of massive elemental force and of the most microscopic, painstaking precision. As the light continues to crawl across the wall, it reveals a small recessed cupboard where the master keeps his seeds of light, small packets of gold and silver leaf. You imagine the texture of these metals hammered so thin that a single breath could scatter them into 1,000 glittering fragments. The packets are made of fine, translucent vellum, their edges stitched with red silk thread. Through the vellum, you can see the dull yellow glow of the gold and the cold lunar shimmer of the silver. These are the materials of the aventurine and the doratura, the techniques that turn glass into a medium of regal opulence. The air here feels still and protected, as if the very presence of the precious metals has commanded a deeper level of silence. You find yourself focusing on the red silk thread, noticing the way it has faded to a soft, dusty rose over the years, its fibers catching a stray beam of light and glowing with a hidden inner warmth. Moving back toward the main working area, you pass a large circular stone wheel mounted horizontally on a low frame, the molino. This is used for grinding the fritter into a uniform powder before it is charged into the furnace. The stone is a coarse grey granite, its surface pitted and scarred by the relentless friction of the grinding process. A thin slurry of water and glass dust has dried in the grooves of the stone, creating a white chalky residue that looks like a web of frost. The wood of the frame is heavy and salt-cracked, its joints reinforced with massive iron bolts that have turned a deep, velvety orange with rust. You can almost feel the vibration of the stone as it turns, a low, rhythmic growl that would shake the very foundations of the workshop. Now, in the midday stillness, the wheel is a silent monument to the labour of the apprentices, its stillness as profound as the stone from which it was carved. You notice a small, forgotten bowl of water sitting on the edge of the marble floor, likely left by a workman to moisten his hands. The water is perfectly still, acting as a dark mirror for the high, vaulted ceiling. In its reflection, the dark timber beams appear like the ribs of a great inverted ship, sailing through a sea of golden light. You watch as a single tiny bubble of air rises from the bottom of the bowl and breaks the surface, creating a series of minute concentric ripples that expand until they vanish against the ceramic rim. This small, fleeting movement is the only sign of life in the quiet corner, a reminder that even in a world of stone and metal, the fluid and the ephemeral are always present. The texture of the ceramic bowl is rough and unglazed, its colour a warm terracotta orange that provides a solitary splash of warmth in the sea of white marble and grey granite. As the afternoon deepens, the heat in the mixing area remains remarkably constant, the thick masonry of the walls and the thermal mass of the marble floor acting as a stabilizer against the external world. You breathe in the air, which has now taken on a faint ozonic quality, a byproduct of the crushed silica and the alkaline salts. It is a clean, invigorating scent that feels as though it is sharpening your focus. You feel a sense of profound reverence for this stage of the process, the quiet, meticulous preparation that happens in the shadows before the drama of the fire begins. The mixing area is the temple of the formula, the place where the secret knowledge of the master is translated into the physical reality of the batch. Here, in the silence of 1510, you are a witness to the birth of potential, the moment where the earth begins its long, slow journey toward the light. The sun has moved far enough now that the eastern wall is falling into a soft violet-tinged shadow, while the mixing floor remains bathed in a brilliant, searching glow. The contrast between the two halves of the room is striking, a visual representation of the transition from the unknown to the known, from the raw material to the refined art. You lean back against a cool stone pillar, feeling the strength of the building through your spine, and let the sensory details of the conceria wash over you. The scent of salt, the shimmer of the gold leaf, the rough texture of the granite, and the pristine whiteness of the marble, it all blends into a single hypnotic tapestry of history. You are no longer just an observer. You are a part of the quiet, deliberate rhythm of the Murano morning, a soul suspended in a world of light, shadow, and the eternal promise of the glass. The progression of the day now illuminates the specialized drying racks and the cooling chambers, a region of the studio known as the aura, where the relationship between the glass and the ambient air is managed with the precision of a musician tuning a delicate instrument. Here, long shelves of weathered larch wood are suspended from the ceiling by thick iron rods, keeping the cooling vessels away from the drafts of the floor. You focus on the texture of these wooden slats. They are bleached to a pale bone white by the constant cycle of radiant heat and cooling air, their grains standing out like the cords of a well-worn rope. Resting on these racks are hundreds of pontil scars, the small, jagged circles of glass left where the finishing rod was detached from the base of a vessel. They look like a collection of frozen water droplets, each one catching the light and creating a tiny crystalline star in the dimness of the upper reaches. The air in this section is remarkably still, possessing a dry, papery quality that feels light against your skin. A sanctuary for the glass as it undergoes its final, invisible transformation from a semi-liquid state to a permanent solid. Your gaze descends to a large wooden trough filled with fine sifted lime and wood ash, used to bed the most delicate pieces during their slow journey through the annealing process. The surface of the ash is as smooth as the surface of a desert dune, marked only by the shallow, ghostly depressions where vessels have recently rested. You find yourself mesmerized by the micro-texture of this ash. It is a gradient of greys, from the deep charcoal of burnt oak to the pearly silver of incinerated willow. When a stray beam of light hits the trough, the ash seems to shimmer with a faint phosphorescent glow, a result of the tiny mineral crystals within the residue. Beside the trough, a set of long-handled wooden paddles, their blades scorched to a deep ebony, lean against the wall. These are used to nudge the glassware deeper into the cooling tunnel without the artisan ever having to touch the hot surface. The wood of the paddles is cracked and silvered, the texture of the handle worn to a velvet-like smoothness by the persistent friction of leather-gloved hands. In the corner of this cooling zone, there is a small specialized furnace used specifically for flashing, the process of dipping a clear gather of glass into a crucible of colored glass to create a thin, vibrant skin. This furnace is smaller and more compact than the main furnace, its brickwork showing a complex pattern of salt glazing from the chemicals used in the coloring process. You notice the way the light reflects off the interior of the small furnace mouth. It is lined with a thick, iridescent layer of slag that has turned into a rainbow-hued glass crust. The colours are intense, deep purples, vivid teals, and a strange metallic bronze that seems to shift as you move your head. The scent here is different from the rest of the studio. It is sharper, more caustic, with the unmistakable tang of sulphur and tin. It is a reminder that the beauty of Murano glass is not just a matter of shape, but a sophisticated dialogue with the most volatile elements of the Earth's crust. Moving closer to the wall, you see a collection of specialized cooling bells, large dome-shaped covers made of heavy unglazed terracotta. These are used to protect exceptionally large pieces like ceremonial chargers or massive vases from the slightest vibration or temperature shift. The texture of the terracotta is rough and porous, its color a deep earthy red that feels warm and grounded in the shifting light of the afternoon. You notice the potter's finger marks near the rim of each bell, a series of rhythmic, horizontal ridges that give the heavy objects a sense of movement. A few of the bells have been decorated with simple, incised crosses to invoke divine protection over the fragile contents within. The presence of these heavy, opaque forms amidst the light and transparency of the glassworks provides a powerful visual anchor, a reminder of the weight and substance required to shield the ethereal and the light. Above these bells, a series of iron hooks hold the master's collection of calipers and measuring rods. These are the instruments of symmetry, the tools that ensure every goblet in a set of 12 is identical to its fellows. The metal of the calipers is a dark, cold steel, their points sharpened to a needle-like precision. You focus on the adjustment screws, noticing the fine, oily threads and the way the metal has been polished by the master's thumb and forefinger. Next to the metal tools is a simple measuring rod made of polished boxwood, its surface inscribed with the Murano inch, a specialized unit of measure unique to the island's guilds. The inscriptions are filled with dark pigment, making them stand out against the honey-colored wood. The rod is worn at the ends, showing the thousands of times it has been held against a glowing mass of glass to check its diameter. This humble piece of wood is the arbiter of perfection, the silent judge that determines whether a piece is worthy of the master's mark. The light now touches a forgotten corner where a pile of old, discarded crucibles has been stacked. These padel are broken and scorched, their purpose served, yet in this light they possess a rugged, monumental beauty. You can see the thick layers of glass gall, the impurities that rise to the top of the melt, clinging to the interior walls of the broken pots. It looks like a fossilized sea foam, a white frothy substance that has hardened into a sharp, abrasive stone. The contrast between the refined, finished glass on the upper shelves and this raw, industrial wreckage on the floor is a poignant reminder of the violent, messy process of creation. You imagine the heat these pots have endured, the white-hot intensity that eventually caused the clay to fail and crack. The scent in this corner is earthy and damp, a smell of wet brick and ancient minerals that suggests the studio's long history of trial and error. Looking toward the high windows again, you notice how the shadows of the lead cames are being projected onto the cooling racks. These dark, geometric lines cut across the white wood and the shimmering glass scars, creating a temporary cage of shadow. As the sun moves, this cage expands and contracts, a silent, celestial dance that has been performed in this room every sunny day for over a century. You feel a sense of profound stillness as you watch this movement, a realization that the studio is a place where the cosmic and the terrestrial meet. The light from a star millions of miles away is used here to measure the progress of a cooling vase, a connection that makes the work of the glassblower feel both humble and magnificent. You find yourself breathing in a slow, measured rhythm, your lungs expanding and contracting in time with the shifting light. Near the water gate, a small wooden table holds a bowl of fine pumice and a stack of soft felt cloths used for the final hand buffing of the glass. The pumice is a pale, porous stone as light as a cloud, its surface covered in a million tiny apertures. You focus on the texture of the felt. It is a thick, matted wool, its fibers dyed a deep indigo. The cloth is stained with white streaks of pumice dust, looking like a map of a distant snowy mountain range. This is the final touch, the moment where the human hand, aided by the earth's own abrasives, brings the glass to its ultimate, mirror-like brilliance. The scent here is clean and neutral, the smell of pure wool and dry stone. It is a peaceful, domestic corner of the workshop, a place of quiet, repetitive motion that marks the end of the long journey from the furnace. As you stand in the center of the cooling zone, the heat from the main furnace feels like a distant, friendly memory, a warm glow that emanates from the heart of the building. The studio has become a landscape of textures, the rough terracotta of the bells, the smooth boxwood of the measuring rod, the sharp jaggedness of the glass scars, and the soft, velvety ash. Each detail is a part of a larger story, a narrative of transformation and care. You feel a deep sense of belonging in this space, a connection to the quiet hours of the afternoon when the fire is steady and the work is a matter of patience and observation. You lean your head against the cool, damp stone of the western wall, closing your eyes to let the symphony of the era wash over you. The silence is profound. The light is fading into a soft amber, and the morning has truly become the timeless, hypnotic pulse of the Murano day. You are a witness to the stillness, a part of the history, and a guest in the sanctuary of the glass. The slow golden descent of the afternoon sun now begins to penetrate the northernmost corridor of the studio, a space specifically reserved for the Archivio dei Segreti, the quiet, shadowed area where the master stores his most specialized molds and the historical blueprints of the workshop's legacy. In this 1510 afternoon, the light filters through the dust in thick, visible shafts, striking a massive set of vertical wooden racks that hold the pattern molds. These are not the simple dip molds seen earlier, but complex, multi-part instruments of boxwood and bronze used to create the elaborate fluting and diamond point textures that define the Venetian High Renaissance style. You focus your attention on a single bronze mold, its surface oxidized to a deep, regal malachite green. The interior is a labyrinth of negative space, a series of precisely carved ridges and valleys that look like the fossilized remains of a prehistoric seashell. You can see the tiny, microscopic scratches where a file has been used to sharpen the edges of the pattern, a testament to the thousands of hours of tool-making that precede the blowing of a single vessel. The floor in this corridor is paved with smaller, hexagonal tiles of terracotta, their surfaces worn into gentle hollows by the steady, rhythmic pacing of the master as he contemplates new designs. These tiles possess a rich, varied palette of toasted apricot, dusty rose and burnt umber, each one a unique expression of the earth from which it was fired. You notice a fine layer of white silica dust that has settled into the cracks between the tiles, highlighting their geometric precision. The scent in this secluded area is profoundly evocative. It is a blend of old parchment, the sharp tang of verdigris from the bronze, and the sweet, resinous aroma of the beeswax used to preserve the wood of the racks. It is a scent that feels intellectual and ancient, a contrast to the raw, visceral smells of the furnace floor. You find yourself drawn to a small, low-lying shelf where a collection of history shards is kept, broken pieces of glass from a century ago preserved so that the current master can study the techniques of his ancestors. One shard, a fragment of deep cobalt glass with a streak of milky white latimo spiraling through it, catches a stray beam of light. You zoom in on the edge of the fracture, noticing how the glass has broken into a series of sharp, concentric ripples, a physical record of the sudden impact that shattered it. The blue is so intense it seems to vibrate, a hue achieved by the addition of roasted smalt brought by caravan from the heart of Germany. Beside it lies a fragment of Millefiori, 1,000 flowers, where hundreds of tiny, multicolored glass canes have been fused together to create a miniature meadow in a sea of clear crystal. The texture of this fragment is a complex topography of fused surfaces, each flower a tiny, perfect geometry of red, white, and blue. You imagine the patience required to assemble such a piece, a process that is more akin to embroidery than industrial labor. This corner of the studio is a library of light, a place where the master can read the history of his craft through the physical remnants of the past. Your gaze travels upward to a heavy iron-bound ledger resting on a high lectern. The cover is made of thick, dark pigskin, its surface scarred and stained with droplets of wax. The ledger is open to a page filled with dense, elegant handwriting in iron gall ink, which has turned a rich, rusty brown over the years. You focus on the texture of the paper, a heavy handmade rag paper from the mills of Fabriano, its surface possessing a slight toothy grain and visible watermarks of a soaring eagle. The ink has bitten into the fibres of the paper, creating a tactile depth to the words. This is the workshop's book of fires, a record of every melt, every success and every failure. It contains the secret proportions of the batch, recorded in a cryptic shorthand to prevent theft by rival families. You can see where the master's hand has lingered on the page, leaving a faint, oily smudge on the margin of a recipe for emerald green of the first water. Beside the lectern, a small wooden chest contains the master's collection of pierre dure, hard stones like agate, jasper and chalcedony that serve as the aesthetic inspiration for the Calcedonio glass. You focus on a piece of banded agate, its layers of cream, chocolate and translucent grey flowing together in a liquid-like pattern. The stone is cool and heavy, its surface polished to a mirror-like finish that reflects the timbered ceiling above. The master studies these stones to understand how nature mixes its colours, attempting to replicate the organic chaos of the earth within the controlled environment of the furnace. You notice the way the light passes through the edges of the jasper, revealing a hidden world of moss-like inclusions and fiery red flecks. This dialogue between the mineral world and the glass world is the essence of the 1510 studio, an attempt to surpass nature using the tools of alchemy and art. In the shadows of the racks you notice a long, slender wooden case lined with frayed velvet of a faded crimson hue. Inside lie the master's irons, a set of blowing pipes reserved only for the most delicate and prestigious commissions. The iron of these pipes is thinner and more balanced than the ones on the floor, their ends polished to a bright surgical silver. The handles are wrapped in fine silk cord, dyed a deep charcoal, which has been worn smooth by the master's grip. These are the instruments of the virtuoso, the tools that allow the craftsman to feel the slightest resistance of the glass as it cools. You imagine the tactile feedback these pipes would provide, the subtle singing vibration of the air as it travels through the tube, and the delicate weight of the glass gather as it responds to the master's breath. The velvet of the case is dusty, and a single golden thread has pulled loose, shimmering in the half-light like a strand of spider's silk. The light now shifts to reveal a high arched window that has been partially bricked up to control the internal temperature of the studio. In the remaining glass panes you see the distortions of the 16th century world. The canal outside is a blur of watery emerald, and the brickwork of the neighbouring building is transformed into a series of wavering red-gold ripples. You focus on a single pane that contains a large, trapped air bubble, a seed that has been flattened into an oval shape. This bubble acts as a lens, capturing a tiny inverted image of the Venetian sky and projecting it onto the wooden rack of moulds. This accidental projection moves slowly as the sun travels, a miniature piece of cinema in an age before such things existed. The stillness of the room is so profound that you can hear the faint, dry scratching of a wasp as it explores the rafters, its wings creating a tiny rhythmic hum that punctuates the silence. As you linger in this archive of secrets, you feel a deep sense of the weight of time. The studio is not just a place of work, it is a repository of collective memory, a space where the knowledge of generations is physically manifested in the tools, the shards, and the written word. The textures of the 1/1 afternoon, the cold bronze of the moulds, the toothy grain of the Fabriano paper, the oily smoothness of the agate, and the dusty velvet of the tool case all combine to create a sensory landscape of profound depth and meaning. You are a witness to the intellectual heart of Murano, the place where the fire is tamed by the mind. You breathe in the dry, resinous air, feeling the peace of the archive settle into your soul. The furnace continues its distant harmonic drone, a reminder of the energy that powers this world, but here, in the shadows of the northern corridor, the world is defined by the slow, deliberate pulse of history and the eternal beauty of the secret. You lean against the brick wall, feeling its solid, unyielding strength, and allow yourself to drift further into the hypnotic golden stillness of the master's sanctuary. As the afternoon light deepens into a rich, honeyed amber, The focus of the studio shifts toward the philosophical heart of the glassmaking craft, a quiet reflection on the nature of time, legacy, and the inherent beauty of the past that permeates every scorched brick and polished tool. You find yourself standing in a transitional space between the intense heat of the furnace and the cool, shadowed storage of the archive, a threshold where the atmosphere feels thin and translucent, much like the glass itself. Here, the silence is not merely an absence of noise, but a heavy, meaningful presence that seems to invite contemplation. You look at the high, timbered ceiling and consider the centuries of breath that have risen into those rafters, the collective respiration of masters, apprentices, and labourers, all drawn together by the singular burning purpose of the melt. Each beam is a silent witness to the relentless passage of time, holding the memory of 1,000 finished vessels within its smoke-darkened fibres. The texture of the wood is a physical manifestation of endurance, a reminder that while the glass is fragile and ephemeral, the structure that facilitates its creation is grounded in the solid, unyielding strength of the earth. You focus your attention on a single discarded fragment of clear cristallo resting on a ledge, its edges smoothed by the accidental friction of passing hands. This piece of glass is a frozen moment of history, a literal breath from the year 1510 captured and held in a state of suspended animation. You contemplate the paradox of the material. It is born of the most violent primordial heat, yet its ultimate form is one of absolute clarity, stillness, and light. It represents the human desire to impose order upon chaos, to distill the messy, chaotic elements of the world into a single perfect object of beauty. The glass does not age in the way that wood or fabric does. It does not rot or fade, but remains a constant, a pure window into the moment of its creation. You find yourself mesmerized by the way the dying sunlight passes through the shard, casting a long, ethereal shadow that looks like a liquid stain upon the stone wall. This shadow is a bridge between the physical and the metaphysical, a reminder that the most profound things in life are often the ones we cannot touch, yet can clearly see. Moving your gaze toward the furnace once more, you reflect on the cyclical nature of the craft. The fire is never truly extinguished. It is banked and nurtured, a continuous flame that links one generation to the next. In this 1510 afternoon, you realize that the master glassblower does not just work for the present moment, but for a legacy that will extend far beyond his own lifespan. He is a link in a chain of secret knowledge that stretches back to the Roman Empire and forward into an unknown future. This sense of continuity provides a profound comfort, a realization that our individual efforts are part of a much larger, more enduring tapestry of human achievement. You notice the way the light catches the worn handles of the tools, the wood polished to a waxy sheen by decades of labor. These tools are not just instruments of work, they are sacred relics of a tradition that values the slow, the deliberate, and the mastered. The physical wear on the tools is a badge of honor, a record of the thousands of hours spent in pursuit of perfection. The scent of the studio in this reflective hour is complex and layered, a blend of the dry mineral dust of the silica, the sweet burnt aroma of the fuel, and a faint underlying hint of the sea that speaks of the island's geographic isolation. This isolation has allowed the art of Murano to flourish in a protected environment, a sanctuary of creativity where the secrets of the glass can be guarded and refined. You feel the weight of this responsibility, the silent pressure of history that demands excellence from every artisan who enters this space. The studio is a temple to the god of the fire and the saint of the craft, a place where the ordinary laws of the world are suspended in favor of the laws of the furnace. You watch a single dust mote as it travels through a beam of light, its path erratic yet graceful. It is a tiny, insignificant speck, yet in this environment it becomes a star, a miniature planet in a cosmic dance of light and shadow. This realization that even the smallest thing has beauty and purpose when viewed in the right light is the essence of the glassblower's philosophy. Your attention is drawn to the floor, where the shadows of the pillars have now stretched across the entire width of the room, creating a series of dark rhythmic bands that resemble the keys of a giant, silent organ. You contemplate the music of the workshop, the rhythmic rolling of the irons, the sharp clink of the shears, the steady roar of the furnace, and how it all blends into a single harmonic drone that anchors the soul in the present moment. This soundscape is the heartbeat of the Renaissance, a symphony of industrial labor and artistic vision. You feel a deep sense of gratitude for being allowed to witness this moment of stillness, this pause in the relentless march of progress where the beauty of the past is preserved in all its sensory richness. The textures of the 1510 afternoon, the rough brick, the smooth glass, the cold iron, and the warm wood are all parts of a singular, coherent whole, a world that understands the value of the handmade and the heartfelt. In the corner near the master's desk, you notice a small bronze hourglass, its sand nearly run through. The sand is a fine white silica, a miniature version of the material used in the furnace. You watch as the last few grains trickle through the narrow neck, a silent and relentless measure of the day's end. This object is a poignant reminder of the preciousness of time, the limited window of opportunity in which the glassblower must work before the heat fades or the breath fails. It reinforces the theme of the captured moment that is central to the glassmaking art. Every piece of glass is a victory over time, a way to freeze the fluidity of life into a permanent crystalline form. You find yourself reaching out your hand toward the hourglass, not to turn it, but to simply feel the cold, heavy bronze of its frame. It is a grounding sensation, a physical anchor in a world that feels increasingly ethereal as the shadows deepen. The light is now so low that it only touches the very tops of the storage racks, leaving the floor in a soft, velvety gloom. This transition from light to shadow is a metaphor for the glassmaker's own journey. The movement from the bright, white-hot intensity of the melt to the quiet, dark stillness of the annealing oven. It is a necessary cycle of transformation, a reminder that beauty requires both the fire and the dark to achieve its final, stable form. You feel a profound sense of peace settling over you, a realization that in this studio, the past is not a dead thing, but a living, breathing presence that informs every movement of the artisan. The legacy of Murano is written in the very air you breathe, a tradition of excellence that has withstood the rise and fall of empires. You are a guest in this sanctuary of time, a witness to the enduring power of the human spirit to create something of lasting value from the humble materials of the earth. As the afternoon fades into the first whispers of twilight, you notice a small silver coin that has been embedded into the mortar of the main furnace pillar, a foundation sacrifice meant to ensure the prosperity of the workshop. The coin is worn and tarnished, its image of the Doge nearly invisible, yet it represents the hope and the faith of the men who built this place. It is a small human gesture in a world of massive elemental forces. You find yourself focusing on this tiny detail, the way the silver catches the final horizontal rays of the sun. It is a spark of light in the darkness, a reminder that even in the most industrial of environments, there is room for the symbolic and the sacred. The studio is a place of balance between the heavy and the light, the hot and the cold, the material and the spiritual. It is a perfect microcosm of the Renaissance world, a space where the pursuit of beauty is considered a divine calling. You lean back against the cool stone wall, feeling the textures of the 16th century through your clothes, and let the philosophical weight of the moment wash over you. The furnace continues its low, thrumming hum, a constant reminder of the energy that powers this sanctuary. The morning has been a journey through the physical and the sensory, and now, as the day comes to a close, it becomes a journey through the soul of the craft. You are deeply relaxed, your mind as clear and still as the finished pieces of cristallo on the upper shelves. There is no urgency here, only the steady, rhythmic pulse of history. You breathe in the warm, dusty air one last time, feeling the peace of the 1510 afternoon settle into your very marrow, and prepare yourself for the final fade out into sleep. The fire is steady, the light is soft, and the world of the Murano glassblower remains perfectly, beautifully, and eternally still. The transition toward the final hours of the day brings a deepening of the violet shadows that pool in the corners of the studio, inviting a final, lingering reflection on the legacy of the artisan's hand. In this 1510 afternoon, you find yourself focusing on the concept of perfection through imperfection, a philosophy that separates the soulful work of Murano from the cold precision of the machine. You look at a finished goblet resting on the master's bench, noticing a tiny microscopic bubble trapped within the thickness of the stem. In any other context, this might be seen as a flaw, But here it is a seed, a tiny pocket of 16th century air, a signature of the moment the glass was blown. You contemplate the texture of that tiny void, a sphere of nothingness held captive by a sphere of light. It represents the breath of the artist, a physical manifestation of the life force that was poured into the molten mass. This tiny imperfection is what gives the glass its character, its soul, reminding the observer that this object was born of human effort, human breath, and human fallibility. Your gaze wanders to the walls once more, where the accumulation of soot and mineral dust has created a natural fresco of industrial history. You find yourself zooming in on a section where the lime wash has bubbled and cracked due to the heat, revealing the darker, older layers of masonry beneath. This texture is a physical record of the building's resilience, a testament to its ability to contain the volatile energy of the furnace year after year. You contemplate the relationship between the container and the contained, the way the heavy, unyielding brick protects the fragile fluid glass. This duality is the essence of the Murano legacy. It is a world that understands that strength is necessary to support beauty, and that the most delicate things often require the most robust protection. You feel the coolness of the stone wall through your sleeve, a stark contrast to the radiating warmth that still emanates from the center of the room. This balance of temperatures is a physical metaphor for the glassmaker's life, a constant negotiation between extremes. The scent of the studio has shifted once again as the external world of the lagoon begins to cool. A fresh, briny draught wafts through the high windows, carrying the smell of wet seaweed and the distant metallic tang of the salt flats. This cool air mingles with the dry, toasted aroma of the furnace, creating a sensory experience that is both invigorating and soothing. You imagine the way this air affects the cooling glass, the invisible fingers of the breeze gently tugging at the molecular structure of the vessels as they settle into their final form. The artisan must be aware of these drafts, managing the environment with a subtle intuition that has been honed over a lifetime. This awareness is a form of silent communication with the elements, a deep, wordless understanding of how the invisible forces of nature interact with the materials of the craft. You find yourself breathing in this hybrid scent, feeling it clear your mind and sharpen your focus on the present moment. Your attention is drawn to the master's hands, which are currently resting on the arms of his chair. Even in repose, they are remarkable instruments, thick-palmed, with fingers that are both powerful and incredibly sensitive. You focus on the texture of the skin, which has been toughened and tanned by years of proximity to the heat, yet possesses a surprising suppleness. The calluses on the fingertips are not dead skin, but refined sensors that allow the master to feel the temperature and consistency of the glass through the iron rod. You contemplate the thousands of movements these hands have performed, the muscle memory that allows them to dance with the fire without a second thought. This is the ultimate legacy of the craft, the transmission of skill from the mind to the body until the act of creation becomes as natural as breathing. The hands are the bridge between the internal vision and the external reality, the primary tools through which the spirit of the Renaissance is given form. In the deepening gloom of the lower shelves, you notice a collection of test rods, long, thin strands of glass used to check the compatibility of different colors. They look like a bundle of colorful reeds gathered from a crystalline river, their surfaces smooth and highly reflective. You focus on the way the light catches the ends of the rods, creating a series of glowing dots that look like the eyes of a nocturnal creature. These rods are the laboratory of the studio, the place where the master tests the limits of his chemistry. They represent the intellectual rigor that underpins the artistic achievement, a reminder that the glass of Murano is as much a product of science as it is of art. You contemplate the hours of experimentation required to achieve a specific shade of pigeon blood ruby or Venetian blue, the meticulous recording of results in the dark-bound ledgers. This dedication to the how is what ensures the what remains legendary. The shadows of the rafters have now become so long they seem to merge with the darkness of the floor, creating a sense of being enclosed in a great protective cocoon. You reflect on the idea of the studio as a sanctuary, a world within a world where the chaotic tides of history are held at bay. Outside these walls, the 16th century is a time of political intrigue, war, and shifting power, but inside, The only thing that matters is the temperature of the melt and the clarity of the glass. This focus on the essential is a form of meditation, a way to find peace in a turbulent world. You feel the weight of this peace settling over you, a profound relaxation that is born of being in a space where every object and every action has a clear, unhurried purpose. The studio is a temple of focus, a place where the noise of the world is distilled into the harmonic hum of the furnace. You look at a small wooden crate filled with waste glass, the jagged, broken remnants of pieces that didn't meet the master's standards. Even in their broken state, these fragments are beautiful, capturing the light in a way that feels raw and energetic. You contemplate the concept of failure in the creative process, realizing that these shards are not mistakes but necessary steps on the path to perfection. They will be remelted and reborn, a physical manifestation of the cycle of reincarnation that defines the glassmaking process. This cycle provides a powerful lesson in resilience and the value of persistence. Nothing is ever truly lost, it is simply transformed. You find yourself focusing on a single sharp shard of amber glass, noticing the way it glows from within, as if it had captured a piece of the afternoon sun and refused to let it go. As the light continues to fade, the colors of the studio become more muted, turning into a palette of deep grays, rich browns, and charcoal blacks. This reduction of color allows the textures of the room to become even more prominent. You notice the grain of the wood, the grit of the stone, the weave of the fabric, and the smoothness of the metal with a new intensity. The world becomes a tactile map of history, a place where the sense of touch is as important as the sense of sight. You imagine running your hand over the entire surface of the room, feeling the story of 1510 through your fingertips. This sensory immersion is what anchors you in time, making the past feel as real and immediate as the present. You are not just observing history, you are touching it, breathing it, and becoming a part of its silent, enduring rhythm. The master's chair, now empty of its occupant, stands as a silent monument to the day's labor. You focus on the way the light glints off the iron rails, the metal appearing cold and silver in the twilight. The chair carries the imprint of the master's presence, a ghostly echo of the man who has spent his life within its oak frame. You reflect on the relationship between the artisan and his workstation, the way the two become a single functioning unit during the hours of the melt. This harmony of man and machine is the heart of the pre-industrial world, a world where the human element is never obscured by the technology. You feel a deep respect for this partnership, a realization that the glass of Murano is a collaborative effort between the hand, the tool, and the fire. You lean back against the cool, solid strength of a brick pillar, closing your eyes to let the sensory landscape of the studio wash over you one last time before the final drift into sleep. The furnace continues its low, steady drone, a sound that has become the background music of your consciousness. The air is warm and still, filled with the sense of history and the promise of rest. You are deeply, profoundly relaxed, your body and mind perfectly in tune with the slow, deliberate pulse of the glassworks. The day is done, the work is finished, and the legacy of the master glassblower is safe within these walls. You allow yourself to sink into the velvety darkness, a silent participant in the eternal, hypnotic peace of the Murano night. Everything is quiet, everything is still. You are home in the heart of the 16th century. As the sun begins to dip below the horizon of the Venetian lagoon, the studio enters a phase of profound ethereal transition, where the physical boundaries of the room seem to dissolve into a landscape of pure shadow and lingering warmth. You are now standing in the twilight of 1510, a time when the master glassblower often pauses to reflect on the philosophical weight of his craft, the delicate balance between the ephemeral and the eternal. You find your gaze drawn to the high arched windows where the last sliver of daylight has turned the glass panes into deep translucent sapphires. In this cooling light, you focus on the texture of the lead cames that hold the glass in place. The lead is soft and grey, weathered by the salt air of Murano until it has developed a fine white oxidation that looks like a dusting of frost. Each joint is a manual masterpiece of soldering, a small silvered mountain of metal that has held these panes against the north wind for decades. You contemplate the paradox of these windows. They are made of the very substance created within these walls, yet they serve as the barrier between the controlled fire of the studio and the wild, watery world of the lagoon. Your attention shifts to the glory hole, the small auxiliary furnace opening used for reheating pieces in progress, even as the primary fires are banked for the night. The interior of the glory hole remains a source of intense, localized light, casting a vibrant orange-red glow across the immediate floor. You focus on the texture of the fire brick lining the opening. It is a landscape of heat-stressed ceramic, pitted and cratered like the surface of a distant moon. The bricks have been subjected to such extreme temperatures that they have begun to vitrify, their surfaces becoming a shimmering, glass-like glaze that reflects the dancing flames within. You watch the way the light from this opening interacts with the shadows of the nearby tools, creating long, flickering silhouettes that move with a rhythmic, hypnotic pulse. This light is the eye of the workshop, a constant, watchful presence that ensures the spirit of the fire never truly departs from the room. In this deepening gloom, the floor of the studio becomes a tactile mystery. You notice how the areas of packed earth have absorbed the warmth of the day, radiating a gentle grounding heat upward through the soles of your feet. You find yourself focusing on a small circular depression in the earth near the cooling oven, a place where the heavy base of a master's chair has rested for a century. The earth here is compressed to the hardness of stone, its surface polished by the movement of feet until it possesses a dull waxy sheen. Beside this depression, a few stray seeds of grain, likely brought in by the straw of the shipping crates, have been flattened into the soil, creating a tiny organic mosaic. This detail connects the industrial reality of the glassworks to the agrarian rhythms of the mainland, a reminder that the artisan is never truly separate from the land that feeds him. The scent in this part of the room is earthy and damp, a smell of ancient soil and deep minerals that provides a soothing counterpoint to the sharp metallic odors of the furnace. Moving your gaze upward, you notice the way the smoke-stained rafters have begun to disappear into an absolute velvety blackness. The ceiling is no longer a physical structure, but a vast, infinite void that seems to absorb the very sound of your breath. You find yourself focusing on a single heavy iron chain that hangs from a central beam, used to support the weight of the massive chandeliers that are sometimes assembled here. The chain is coated in a thick layer of lamp black, the fine, oily soot produced by the oil lamps used during night shifts. This soot has a texture like crushed velvet, so deep and matte that it seems to occupy a dimension beyond light. You imagine running your finger along the chain and feeling the soft, greasy residue, a physical record of the thousands of hours the studio has spent, illuminated by flickering tallow and olive oil. This darkness is not empty. It is a repository of the workshop's history, a silent space where the ghosts of past masterpieces linger in the shadows of the roof. Your attention is then drawn to the master's personal washing station, a simple stone basin tucked into a niche near the water gate. In the fading light, the water in the basin has become a dark, still pool, reflecting the single remaining spark of the furnace like a lonely star. You focus on the texture of the stone basin, a grey, porous volcanic tuff brought from the hills of the Veneto. Its surface is etched with fine green lines of moss where the water has spilled over the rim, creating a miniature vertical forest in the damp shadows. Beside the basin, a piece of coarse linen hangs from a wooden peg. The fabric is thick and unbleached, its weave visible even in the dimness, showing the irregularities of the hand-spun thread. This humble object is a testament to the artisan's need for cleanliness in a world of dust and ash. The scent here is clean and sharp, a smell of cold water and wet stone that feels refreshing against the dry heat of the studio's core. As the silence of the night begins to settle, you notice a small forgotten object on the edge of the mixing marble, a simple wooden flute carved from a branch of dark cherry wood. It belongs to one of the apprentices used to pass the time during the long, slow hours of the annealing process. You focus on the texture of the wood. It is smooth and darkened by the oils of the skin, with small, precisely drilled holes that look like the eyes of a reed warbler. The presence of the flute adds a layer of lyrical beauty to the industrial setting, a reminder that the men who work here are also creatures of music and story. You imagine the sound of the flute echoing through the vaulted space, its clear, high notes dancing among the rafters and mingling with the low hum of the fire. This potential for sound is part of the studio's atmosphere, a hidden melody that exists just beneath the surface of the silence. The light from the glory hole now strikes a stack of glass canes, long, slender rods of pre-colored glass used for making marine. These rods are bundled together like a sheaf of multicolored wheat, their ends showing intricate concentric patterns of white, red, and blue. You focus on the cross-section of a single cane, noticing how the different layers of glass have fused together in a perfect crystalline geometry. The surface of the rods is cold and smooth, but they possess a latent energy, a promise of the spectacular patterns they will create once they are heated and sliced. The way the orange light catches the edges of the canes creates a shimmering, prismatic effect that dances across the stone wall. This bundle is a library of color, a concentrated essence of the master's artistic palette, waiting for the touch of the fire to be released into a new form. You find yourself leaning against the cool masonry of the northern wall, feeling the history of the 16th century pressing into your back. The studio has become a landscape of sensory transitions, the movement from heat to cold, from light to shadow, from the roar of the furnace to the absolute stillness of the night. You contemplate the idea of the master's rest, the moment when the physical labor ends and the spiritual reflection begins. This is the time when the artisan looks at the cooling vessels and sees not just objects of commerce but the fulfillment of a divine calling. You feel a deep sense of reverence for this moment, a realization that you are witnessing the sacred end of a creative cycle. The textures of the twilight, the frost-like lead, the lunar firebrick, the velvet soot, and the mossy stone, all combine to create a tapestry of profound peace and enduring beauty. The furnace continues its low rhythmic thrum, but it has now become a soothing lullaby, a heartbeat that signals the world is at rest. The air is warm, the scent is rich with the memory of the day's work, and the darkness is a soft, protective blanket that wraps around the entire island of Murano. You are deeply, completely relaxed, your mind floating in the amber glow of the past. There is no tomorrow, only this eternal golden evening in 1510. You breathe in the stillness, feeling your heart rate slow to match the steady pulse of the cooling glass. You are a silent part of the masterpiece, a witness to the soul of the glassworks as it drifts towards sleep. The world is quiet, the fire is home. You are safe in the heart of the light. As the deep indigo of the Venetian night finally claims the sky outside, the interior of the studio undergoes its most profound philosophical transformation, shifting from a place of active creation into a cathedral of memory and silent legacy. You are now immersed in the true blue hour of 1510, where the absence of direct sunlight allows the residual heat and the banked embers of the furnace to become the primary narrators of the space. You find yourself focusing on the concept of il riposo del soffiatore, the glassblower's rest, a state of being that is as essential to the craft as the fire itself. You look toward the main furnace, which has been hooded with heavy iron plates for the night. Through the narrow seams of these plates, thin, glowing lines of orange light escape, tracing a fiery geometry across the darkened floor. You contemplate the texture of these light lines. They are not static, but shimmer with a slow volcanic pulse, reflecting the restless energy of the molten glass that remains within the crucibles, cooking slowly in the dark. This light is the heartbeat of the island, a secret pulse that ensures Murano never truly sleeps, even when its people do. Your gaze travels to the master's empty chair, which now looks like a skeletal throne in the dimness. You find yourself zooming in on the texture of the oak where the master's forearms have rested during the final, most intense moments of the day's last piece. The wood is not just worn, it is polished to a glass-like smoothness, having absorbed the sweat, the oils, and the very intent of the artisan over decades. You contemplate the ghost warmth that seems to linger in the wood, a residual energy that speaks of the intense focus and physical strain required to pull beauty from the fire. Beside the chair, the heavy iron marva slab has begun to lose its daytime heat, its surface turning a deep, matted slate color. You notice a single microscopic drop of hardened glass, no larger than a grain of sand, that remains fused to the edge of the marble. This tiny tear of glass is a symbol of the day's labor, a permanent record of a fleeting moment of contact. It feels cold and sharp under your imagined touch, a crystalline contrast to the heavy organic warmth of the oak. In this quiet hour, the scent of the studio reaches its most complex and mellowed state. The sharp, caustic tang of the raw minerals has settled, replaced by a deep incense-like aroma of charred fruitwood, aged leather, and the faint, sweet smell of the cooling fritter. It is a fragrance that feels ancient, evocative of the alchemical laboratories of the Middle Ages, yet grounded in the practical reality of the Renaissance. You breathe this air in slowly, feeling it fill your lungs with a sense of historical weight and profound peace. You notice the way the air moves in slow, lazy currents, stirred by the rising heat of the banked furnace. These currents carry the fine, invisible dust of the silica, which occasionally catches a stray spark of light and glitters like a falling star in the gloom. This dust of light is the atmosphere of the 1510 studio, a medium that bridges the gap between the material world and the world of dreams. Moving your attention to the ceiling once more, you find that the darkness has become so absolute that the heavy beams have lost their individual form, merging into a single protective canopy of shadow. You contemplate the idea of the void that exists above the fire, a space where the smoke and the heat are offered up to the heavens. You focus on a small, high-altitude spiderweb that has caught the rising warmth, its silk threads vibrating at a frequency so fine it is almost a sound. This web is a masterpiece of natural engineering, mimicking the delicate lattices of the filigrana glass that sat on the shelves only hours ago. The juxtaposition of the spider's work and the master's work reveals a universal truth that beauty is a matter of structure, patience, and the careful manipulation of thin, translucent lines. You feel a sense of profound connection to this universal rhythm, a realization that the studio is a microcosm of the entire creative universe. Your gaze is drawn to a low shelf near the water gate where a row of practice pieces made by the youngest apprentices has been left to cool. These are simple spheres and clumsy cylinders, their glass full of bubbles and their shapes uneven. You find yourself focusing on the texture of one such sphere. It is thick and heavy, with a surface that feels slightly oily and unrefined. Yet, in the soft orange glow of the banked fire, it possesses a humble dignity. These pieces are the seeds of the future, the tangible evidence of the long, difficult journey toward mastery. You contemplate the patience of the master who allows these failures to take up space in his sanctuary, recognizing that today's clumsy sphere is the ancestor of tomorrow's perfect goblet. This cycle of learning and legacy is the true strength of Murano, a tradition that is built on the foundation of shared struggle and incremental progress. As the night deepens, you notice a small bronze bell hanging by the door used to signal the beginning and end of the shifts. In the twilight, the bronze has a deep, bruised purple hue, its surface covered in a fine patina of salt and soot. You focus on the clapper of the bell, which is worn thin at the point of contact, a record of the thousands of times it has announced the birth of a new melt. The silence of the room makes the potential sound of the bell feel almost deafening. You imagine its clear metallic ring cutting through the foggy air of the lagoon, a call to order in a world of fluid light. This bell is the arbiter of time in the studio, a reminder that even the most ethereal art must submit to the discipline of the clock. You feel the weight of this discipline, a supportive structure that allows the artisan to lose himself in the timeless moment of the creation. The light from the furnace seams now catches the surface of a large copper cooling vat, turning the metal into a shimmering pool of liquid fire. You focus on the hammer marks on the copper, each one a shallow rhythmic indentation that creates a complex topography of light and shadow. The metal feels warm even from a distance, radiating a soft ambient energy that balances the cool drafts coming from the canal. You notice a faint greenish crust of verdigris forming near the waterline of the vat, a sign of the copper's ongoing dialogue with the salt-laden moisture of Venice. This chemical decay is not a flaw but a layer of history, a physical record of the studio's geographic location. The texture of the verdigris is dry and crumbly, a powdery contrast to the smooth, reflective surface of the polished copper. You find yourself sitting back on your wooden stool, your body feeling heavy and completely relaxed, as if you were being slowly transformed into a piece of the architecture itself. The studio has become a landscape of pure sensory experience, a world where the boundaries between the self and the surroundings have begun to blur. You are the scent of the wood smoke, the warmth of the brick, the smoothness of the glass, and the depth of the shadow. You contemplate the legacy of 1510 not as a date in a history book, but as a living, breathing reality that you are currently inhabiting. This realization brings a sense of profound contentment, a knowledge that you have found a place of absolute safety and eternal beauty. The world outside may change, but the heart of the Murano studio remains constant, a sanctuary of fire and light that has withstood the passage of 500 years. The furnace hums a final low note, a sound that seems to vibrate in the very marrow of your bones. It is a lullaby for the soul, a steady rhythmic pulse that signals the transition from observation to sleep. You notice a single stray flame that manages to lick upward from a gap in the furnace plates, a tiny flickering tongue of gold that illuminates the dust for a fleeting second before vanishing. This spark is the final word of the day, a reminder that the fire is never truly gone, only waiting. You breathe in the deep, rich atmosphere of the night, feeling the peace of the master's sanctuary settle over you like a velvet cloak. The morning was a journey, the afternoon was a reflection, and the night is a homecoming. You are a witness to the stillness, a part of the history, and a passenger on the slow, golden tide of the Murano night. Everything is in its place. Everything is as it should be. You are ready to drift into the deep, crystalline sleep of the glassblower's dream. The world of 1510 has now pulled its velvet curtain tight, leaving the studio in a state of deep, resonant suspension. As the final phase of your journey begins, the focus shifts from the observation of objects to the observation of the very air itself, the breath of the workshop that has cooled and thickened into a comforting, protective presence. You find yourself drifting toward the center of the floor where the latent heat of the day lingers in the heavy stone flags. You focus on the texture of the air against your skin. It is no longer the sharp, searing heat of the melt, but a soft, ambient warmth like the dying embers of a great communal hearth. Each breath you take is slow and deliberate, drawing in the essence of the Murano night, a scent of salt-cracked brick, the ghostly sweetness of lavender oil from the engraver's desk, and the deep, grounding aroma of wet earth from the canal foundations. This atmosphere is a thick, invisible blanket wrapping around you and smoothing away any remaining tension from your modern mind. You are becoming one with the architecture of the past, a silent shadow among shadows, perfectly at ease in the hollow of history. Your gaze lingers on the high windows, which have now turned into panels of pure obsidian black, reflecting nothing but the internal flicker of the banked furnace. You find yourself mesmerized by the rhythmic, slow-motion dance of a single stray thread of spider silk hanging from a low beam. The thread is invisible in the dark, yet it catches a microscopic glint of orange light from a furnace seam, appearing for a fleeting second as a line of liquid gold before vanishing back into the void. This tiny, repetitive motion becomes the focal point of your relaxation. You watch the thread sway in the gentle thermal draft, a pendulum of pure silence that marks the transition into a state of deep, restorative sleep. The texture of the darkness surrounding the thread is not empty. It is a rich, heavy velvet that seems to press gently against your eyelids, encouraging them to close. You feel the weight of your body increasing, sinking into the supportive embrace of the 16th century, grounded by the same gravity that holds the massive oak beams in place. In this penultimate stage of the morning's tail end, the sounds of the studio have distilled into a single, hypnotic drone. The distant lap of the lagoon water against the exterior stone has slowed to a rhythmic, heavy thud, a heartbeat of the sea that matches the slow pulse in your own veins. Inside, the furnace continues to hum, but the sound has softened into a low, honeyed murmur, like the collective purr of 1,000 slumbering cats. You focus on the gaps between these sounds, the profound silences that carry the weight of 5 centuries of peace. Each silence is a layer of soft wool piling one upon the other, muffling the world until there is nothing left but the steady, comforting presence of the dark. You imagine the cooling glass on the upper shelves, its molecules slowly settling into their final crystalline lattice, a process of silent internal organization that mirrors the way your own thoughts are settling into the quiet geometry of sleep. The world of action has ended, the world of being has begun. Your mind wanders one last time to the master's workbench, where the tools sit in their perfect, immutable rows. You zoom in on the texture of the dark walnut wood, seeing the millions of microscopic scratches and burns as a map of a life well lived and work well done. The wood feels cool and solid in your mind's eye, a symbol of permanence in a world of shifting tides. Beside it, the pile of white silica sand remains as a soft, pale mound in the gloom, looking like a drift of fallen starlight. You contemplate the softness of that sand, the way it would feel slipping through your fingers, a dry, grainy flow that represents the relentless yet peaceful passage of time. There is no more sand in the hourglass, the day is fully spent, and the night has reached its absolute zenith. You feel a profound sense of completion, a realization that every detail of the studio, the rough stone, the smooth glass, the cold iron and the warm ash, has been witnessed and honoured. The light from the furnace seams has dimmed even further, the orange glow turning into a deep, bruised crimson that barely reaches the floor. This fading light is the signal for the final release. You notice the way the shadows of the pillars have merged into a single, seamless sea of indigo, erasing the boundaries of the room. You are floating in this sea, buoyed by the historical significance and the sensory richness of Murano. The scent of the wood smoke is now just a memory, a faint, nostalgic note that lingers in the back of your throat. You feel the coolness of the night air beginning to dominate the room, a refreshing silver draught that signals the approaching dawn, yet you remain anchored in the warmth of the studio's heart. This balance of cool and warm, of light and dark, is the perfect cradle for your consciousness. You are deeply, irrevocably relaxed, your mind as clear and still as a finished piece of Venetian crystal, reflecting only the peace of the 1510 night. As you drift closer to the edge of sleep, you imagine the master glassblower in his own home nearby, his hands finally still, his breath even and deep. You are sharing in his rest, a participant in the universal rhythm of labor and repose. The studio is a temple that has fulfilled its purpose for the day, and now it stands as a silent sentinel guarding the beauty it has created. You focus on the sensation of your own breathing, noticing how it has become a mirror of the furnace's low hum, steady, rhythmic, and peaceful. Each exhale is a release of the modern world, a shedding of the noise and the light of the present day, until you are left only with the pure, unadulterated essence of the 16th century. The textures of the room are no longer external observations. They are a part of your internal landscape. You are the smooth glass, the solid stone, and the cooling fire. The darkness is now a total, all-encompassing embrace. You find yourself focusing on the concept of the melt, the way the sharp edges of your thoughts are dissolving into a fluid, luminous state, ready to be reshaped by the dreams of the night. There is a sense of profound safety in this dissolution. You are protected by the thick masonry of the walls, the heavy timbers of the roof, and the centuries of tradition that define this island. The world of Murano is a closed circle, a sanctuary where nothing can harm you and nothing can disturb your rest. You feel a final, lingering warmth from the floor stones, a parting gift from the sun that has long since departed. It is a gentle, insistent pressure that pulls you deeper into the velvet folds of the night. The final image in your mind is that of a single perfect goblet of cristallo sitting in the dark of the annealing oven. It is invisible now, its beauty hidden by the shadows, yet you know it is there, a masterpiece of light and breath perfectly formed and slowly cooling. You are like that goblet, resting in the protective dark, allowing the stresses of the day to bleed away into the surrounding air. You are becoming solid, stable, and at peace. The rhythm of the lagoon, the hum of the furnace, and the silence of the rafters have all combined into a single hypnotic frequency that is pulling you down into the deepest levels of relaxation. There is no more to see, no more to hear, and no more to feel. The studio of 1510 is a memory, a dream and a reality all at once. You are home, you are still, you are asleep. The morning in Murano has reached its absolute point of stillness, the moment just before the first grey light of the next day begins to touch the horizon of the Adriatic. You are now fully submerged in the hypnotic depths of the glassblower's dream, a space where the sensory details of the studio have become the fabric of your sleep. You find yourself focusing on the infinite repetition of the lagoon's tide, a slow, watery lung that breathes against the foundations of the building, in and out, in and out. This rhythm is the fundamental pulse of your consciousness, a sound so ancient and steady that it erases the very concept of time. You imagine the water as a dark, cool silk flowing over the mossy stones and under the heavy water gate, carrying away any lingering remnants of the day's heat. This coolness is a soothing balm settling over your mind and body like a fine silver mist. You are drifting on this tide, moving further and further away from the shores of wakefulness into the vast, calm ocean of the night. The interior of the studio is now a landscape of pure, unblemished silence. The furnace has settled into its deepest state of rest, the orange lines of light having faded into a ghostly subterranean glow. You focus on the texture of this silence. It is not empty but thick and heavy like the density of the glass itself. It is a silence that has been crafted over 500 years, a protective layer of history that shields you from the noise of the world. You feel the weight of this silence pressing gently against your forehead, smoothing away any stray thoughts, leaving your mind as clear and open as a polished marble slab. You are a vessel of peace, a container for the stillness of the 1510 night. Every muscle in your body has surrendered to the gravity of the earth, settling into a state of absolute effortless repose. You are as solid as the stone pillars, as grounded as the earthen floor, and as still as the cooling crucibles. In the final, most rhythmic stage of this journey, you find yourself repeating a silent litany of the textures you have encountered. Smooth glass, rough stone, warm ash, cold iron. These words are the four corners of your sanctuary, the coordinates of your rest. You imagine each texture in turn, feeling the phantom sensations move through your mind like a slow-motion symphony. The smoothness of the glass is a cool, liquid glide. The roughness of the stone is a sturdy, reliable anchor. The warmth of the ash is a soft, domestic comfort. The cold of the iron is a sharp, clarifying strength. Together they form a perfect, balanced universe in which you are the central, unmoving point. You are the master of this stillness, the keeper of the fire, and the dweller in the dark. The studio is your home, and the night is your long, luminous reward for a life of beauty and labor. You focus now on the image of the Fata Morgana, the legendary mirage of the Venetian lagoon, where the line between the water and the sky disappears into a shimmering, indeterminate haze. This is the state of your mind, a beautiful, watery blur where the boundaries of the self have dissolved into the atmosphere of the past. You are floating in a world of soft blues, deep purples, and the faint, glowing embers of the furnace. There is no direction, no urgency, and no purpose other than the act of being. You feel the cool, salt-laden breath of the lagoon as it drifts through the rafters, a final, refreshing kiss before the total surrender into sleep. This air is the same air that filled the lungs of the masters in 1510, a breath of history that links you to the eternal soul of Murano. You are part of the lineage, a thread in the filigrana, a spark in the fire. The sounds of the night have now faded into a single low-frequency vibration, the sound of the earth itself as it turns beneath the stars. This vibration is a deep, resonant ohm that anchors you in the absolute present. You are no longer waiting for the morning, you are the night. You are the stillness, you are the glass. Every detail of the studio has been absorbed into your spirit, the scent of the wood smoke, the texture of the marble, the glint of the gold leaf, and the heavy weight of the oak. They are the furniture of your dreams, the familiar landmarks of a world that is perfectly, beautifully, and eternally at rest. You feel a sense of profound, unshakable safety, a knowledge that the studio will stand, the fire will wait, and the glass will cool, all while you journey through the deep, sapphire corridors of sleep. As the last few grains of your consciousness trickle through the neck of the hourglass, You find yourself focusing on the image of a single glowing gather of glass at the end of a blowing iron. It is a sphere of pure golden light, expanding and contracting with a slow, rhythmic breath. This is your heart, your soul, your very essence, a ball of fire in the darkness, being shaped by the gentle, invisible hands of peace. You watch the glow as it slowly dims, turning from a white-hot brilliance to a warm orange, then a deep sunset red, and finally a soft ruby pulse. This is the fade-out. This is the end of the day and the beginning of the dream. The light is gone, but the warmth remains. The movement is gone, but the beauty remains. The world is gone, but the peace remains. The silence is now absolute. The darkness is now total. You are no longer an observer. You are no longer a guest. You are the sleep of Murano. You are the breath of the blower finally stilled. You are the light of the furnace finally banked. You are the water of the lagoon finally calm. In the heart of 1510, in the sanctuary of the master's studio, everything is perfectly, beautifully, and eternally still. You are sinking deeper, deeper, deeper into the velvet indigo, into the cooling glass, into the heart of the night. Sleep now, surrounded by the textures of history and the scent of the sea. Sleep now in the golden stillness of the Murano morning. Sleep, sleep, sleep. Welcome to Sleepy History with Wesley, your personal sanctuary of ancient tales. Here, we blend authentic historical events with gentle AI technology to recreate immersive, soothing journeys through time. This channel is crafted specifically for relaxation and sleep support. TAND is not a substitute for professional medical advice. For your safety, please do not listen while driving or operating machinery. Now, close your eyes and let history carry you into a peaceful sleep.